She thought serving champagne to billionaires was the worst thing about her night, until one of them decided she was for sale. Sophie Carter's medical school tuition hangs by a thread, so she works elite galas where the rich don't even see her face. Tonight, everything changes. A powerful man corners her in a hallway. Escape seems impossible, until a dangerous stranger with cold eyes and blood on his reputation steps between them, claiming her as his own. What starts as salvation becomes something far more complicated. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Rothmore Hotel didn't just host wealth, it swallowed it whole and spit out decadence. Sophie Carter balanced a tray of champagne flutes, her black server's uniform starched stiff enough to scrape skin, and reminded herself that 6 hours of this paid 3 weeks of groceries. The ballroom glittered under chandeliers that probably cost more than her entire medical school debt, which was saying something, considering that debt could buy a decent house in most American cities. She wasn't supposed to make eye contact. The event coordinator had been clear during the pre-shift briefing. Your furniture. Smile, serve, stay invisible. Sophie had perfected invisible over the past 2 years. Invisible got her through 12-hour shifts at the diner near campus. Invisible kept her head down in lecture halls where her classmates wore Canada Goose jackets and discussed their parents' vacation homes. Invisible was survival. Excuse me. A woman in a dress that cost more than Sophie's car, back when she'd had a car, snapped manicured fingers without looking at her. Sophie handed over champagne with a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. The gala benefited something. Sophie hadn't bothered learning what. They all blurred together: cancer research, children's literacy, art preservation. Rich people feeling good about being rich, mostly. The only thing that mattered was the $200 cash she'd collect at the end of the night, tips not included. Her feet ached in the cheap heels she'd bought at a discount store, the kind that would fall apart in 3 months but were the best she could afford. The tray grew lighter as guests plucked drinks with the casual entitlement of people who'd never worried about money. Sophie's mind wandered to the anatomy exam waiting Monday morning, to the stack of flashcards on her apartment's excuse for a kitchen table, to the email from student services she'd been avoiding for a week. Miss Carter, this is your final notice regarding your outstanding balance. She'd figure it out. She always did. Daniel would have told her to quit, to find an easier path. But Daniel was 3 years dead and his opinions didn't pay bills. You look lost. Sophie blinked, realizing she'd stopped moving, standing in the middle of the ballroom like an idiot. A man in his 50s smiled at her, the kind of smile that tried too hard. Everything about him screamed money. The custom tuxedo, the watch that probably had a waiting list, the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Just taking a breath, Sophie said, lifting her tray slightly. Can I get you anything? Actually, yes. His eyes traveled down, then back up, taking inventory. You can tell me your name. Every muscle in Sophie's body tensed. She'd dealt with this before. Men who thought the uniform came with extra services. Usually they got bored when she played dumb and uninterested. Sophie, she said, voice flat. The champagne's French. The hors d'oeuvres are by the east wall. I'm not interested in champagne. He stepped closer. His cologne was expensive and suffocating. I'm interested in how someone like you ends up working an event like this. Someone like you. The words landed exactly as intended. Rent, Sophie said. Same reason anyone works. His laugh was too loud. 2 women nearby glanced over, saw nothing worth their attention, and returned to their conversation. Sophie's grip tightened on the tray. I like that. Honest. He reached out, fingertips grazing her wrist. I'm Richard Castellane. I own Castellane Industries. Sophie had no idea what that was and didn't care. She stepped back, putting professional distance between them. That's nice. I should keep moving. Wait. His hand caught her elbow. Not hard, but firm enough to stop her. I'm having a private gathering next week. Very exclusive. I could use someone like you to help serve. The pay would be significantly better than this. The words were smooth, practiced. Sophie had heard variations before, usually from men old enough to be her father, who thought young and broke meant available. I'm not interested, she said clearly. You haven't heard the offer. Oh, don't need to. His smile thinned. The friendly mask slipped, showing something harder underneath. That's unfortunate. I'm not used to being rejected. First time for everything. Sophie tried to pull away. His grip tightened. I think you're being rude. I think you should let go. Or what? Richard's voice dropped, losing all pretense of charm. You'll complain to management? Tell them I propositioned the help? Do you know who I am? Sophie's heart hammered against her ribs. The ballroom suddenly felt too big and too small at once. People milled around, oblivious, lost in their own importance. She could scream, probably. Make a scene. And then she'd be fired, blacklisted from every catering company in the city, lose the $200 she desperately needed. Daniel's voice echoed in her head. Sometimes the system's rigged, Soph. Sometimes you just gotta survive it. Let go, she said again, quieter now, hating the shake in her voice. I don't think the lady asked you to let go. The new voice cut through the tension like a blade, deep, controlled, with an edge that promised consequences. Richard's hand dropped from Sophie's elbow as if burned. Sophie turned to see the man who'd spoken. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair cut short and features that would have been handsome if they weren't so carefully blank. His tuxedo fit perfectly, custom-made, but he wore it like armor, not decoration. What struck her most were his eyes, dark, assessing, missing nothing, and cold. The kind of cold that came from seeing terrible things and doing worse. Russo, Richard said, and Sophie didn't miss the way his voice changed, wary now, almost afraid. This doesn't concern you. No? The man, Russo, looked at Sophie, really looked, like he was cataloging every detail. Seems like it does. We were just talking. That's not what it looked like. The air between the two men crackled with something dangerous. Sophie's instinct screamed at her to leave, to fade back into the crowd, to remember that she was supposed to be invisible. But her feet stayed planted, tray clutched in white-knuckled hands. She's nobody, Richard said, dismissive. Just a server. Then you won't mind walking away. It wasn't a suggestion. Richard's jaw clenched, a muscle jumping in his cheek. For a moment, Sophie thought he might argue, might push back against whatever unspoken threat hung in the silence. Then his eyes flicked to Sophie, calculating, before returning to Russo. We'll finish this conversation later, Richard said to Sophie. No, Russo said quietly. You won't. The smile Richard attempted didn't reach his eyes. I'll see you around, Russo. He left, disappearing into the crowd with the practiced ease of someone used to making exits. Sophie released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her hand shook slightly, making the remaining champagne flutes rattle on the tray. Thank you, she managed, looking up at her unexpected savior. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. Russo's gaze hadn't left her face. How long have you worked for him? What? I don't work for him. I work for the catering company. But you've seen him before. Tonight's the first time. Sophie frowned. Why? Russo didn't answer immediately. He looked at her like he was solving a puzzle, working through calculations she couldn't see. Finally, he reached out, plucked a champagne flute from her tray, and took a sip without breaking eye contact. What's your name? She'd already given it to Richard, but something about repeating it to this man felt different, more permanent. Sophie. Sophie. He tested the name, nodding slightly. I'm Adrian. Thank you, Adrian, really, but I should get back to work before you're done for the night. Sophie blinked. Excuse me? Tell your supervisor you're not feeling well. Leave. Adrian set the champagne flute back on her tray with careful precision. Richard Castellane is a vindictive bastard. He'll find you again tonight if you stay. I need this job. I need the money. How much? The question caught her off guard. What? How much do you make tonight? Sophie's pride warred with practicality. Pride lost. It usually did these days. 200 base pay. Tips vary. Adrian reached into his jacket, pulled out a wallet, and extracted several bills without counting them. He held them out to her. Sophie stared at the money. 5 $100 bills, crisp and clean. I can't take that. You can. I don't even know you. You know, I just kept Richard from making your night significantly worse. Consider it payment for your time. When Sophie still didn't move, Adrian stepped closer, his voice dropping. Pride's expensive, Sophie. Take the money. Leave. Don't make me regret helping you. The last sentence carried weight. Sophie took the bills, feeling their unfamiliar thickness between her fingers. $500. More than she'd make in 2 weeks of shifts. Why are you doing this? Adrian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, amusement, maybe, or recognition. Because Richard touching what's mine pisses me off. Sophie's breath caught. I'm not... I know. Adrian's smile was slight, barely there. But he doesn't, and now he never will. Before Sophie could process what that meant, Adrian turned and walked away, cutting through the crowd with the same ease Richard had. People moved out of his path without seeming to notice they were doing it, like water flowing around a stone. Sophie stood frozen, holding a tray of champagne in one hand and $500 in the other, trying to understand what had just happened. Sophie! Maria, another server, rushed over. What the hell was that about? Who was that guy? I don't know. That was Adrian Russo. Maria's eyes were wide. Do you know who he is? Should I? Jesus Christ, Sophie. He practically owns half the city. Well, the half the city doesn't want to talk about. Maria lowered her voice. My cousin works security at a club downtown. Says Russo's connected to everything. Construction, imports, half the restaurants in the financial district. And that's just the legitimate stuff. Sophie's stomach dropped. Connected. As in, you don't want to owe him anything. As in, people who cross him tend to have accidents. Maria grabbed Sophie's arm. What did he want with you? Nothing. Some guy was bothering me. Adrian stepped in. Adrian, you're on a first-name basis? Maria looked like she might pass out. Sophie, you need to be careful. Guys like that don't do favors for free. The $500 felt heavier in Sophie's hand. She thought about her overdue tuition, her empty refrigerator, the electric bill due in 3 days. She thought about Daniel, who died because they couldn't afford the medication that might have saved him, whose last words to her had been, "Get out, Soph. Be someone." I need to go, Sophie said. What about your shift? Tell them I'm sick. She was already moving, heading for the service exit, leaving her tray on a nearby table. The money stayed clutched in her fist, warm from Adrian's wallet. Behind her, the gala continued, oblivious. Music played, rich people laughed, the world kept spinning, uncaring. Outside, the October air bit through her thin uniform. Sophie stood on the service dock behind the Rothmore, breathing hard, trying to sort through the past 15 minutes. A man had cornered her. Another man had saved her. She was $500 richer and entirely out of her depth. Her phone buzzed, a text from Maria. Are you okay? Sophie typed back. Yeah, thanks for covering. She should go home. Sleep. Pretend this was just another weird night in a life full of them. Instead, she found herself thinking about Adrian Russo's cold eyes and the way he'd said what's mine like it was fact, not fiction. The service door opened. Sophie jumped, but it was just Carlos, one of the kitchen staff, taking out trash. You good? He asked. Yeah, just needed air. Fair enough, that crowd's brutal. Carlos hefted a garbage bag into the dumpster. You heading out? In a minute. He nodded and went back inside, leaving Sophie alone with her thoughts and her borrowed money. She pulled out her phone, typed Adrian Russo into the search bar, then stopped. Did she really want to know? Ignorance felt safer, cleaner. She searched anyway. The results were sparse and contradictory. A few society page mentions, charitable donations, real estate acquisitions, appearances at events like tonight's. Nothing concrete, nothing incriminating. But between the lines, in the carefully neutral language of local news, Sophie could read the truth Maria had spoken. Adrian Russo was dangerous, connected, untouchable in the way that money and power made men untouchable, and he'd given her $500 like it was nothing. What's mine? Sophie shivered, and it had nothing to do with the cold. 3 days passed before she saw him again. Sophie had almost convinced herself it was a one-time thing, a strange intersection of lives that would never cross again. She'd paid her electric bill, bought groceries that weren't ramen or peanut butter, and put the remaining $300 toward her tuition balance. The student services email had been answered, breathing room purchased. She'd gone back to her routine, classes, studying, picking up shifts where she could. The memory of the gala faded slightly, taking on the quality of a half-remembered dream. Richard Castellane's grabbing hand, Adrian Russo's cold intervention, the money that had felt like salvation and threat all at once. Then Tuesday afternoon, Sophie walked out of her gross anatomy lab to find a black car idling at the curb. Not just any car. The kind of car that turned heads, sleek and expensive and deeply out of place in the medical school parking lot surrounded by beat-up Honda Civics and student debt on wheels. A man in a dark suit stood beside it, and when he saw Sophie, he straightened. "Miss Carter?" Sophie stopped walking. "Who's asking?" "Mr. Russo would like a moment of your time." Her heart did something complicated in her chest. "I don't think—" The rear door opened. Adrian Russo stepped out, and Sophie's words died. He looked different in daylight. No tuxedo. Just dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than her textbooks. But the eyes were the same, dark, unreadable, fixed on her with uncomfortable intensity. "Sophie, he said. Not a question, a statement. What are you doing here?" "Making sure Richard got the message." "What message?" Adrian's expression didn't change, but something about his posture shifted. "That you're off limits. Unfortunately, Richard's ego makes him stupid. He asked around about you." Ice formed in Sophie's stomach. "Asked around? Where you work, where you go to school, your class schedule?" Adrian gestured to the medical school building behind her. "You're not hard to find. And you know this because I made sure to know what he was looking for before he found it." The casual admission should have terrified her. Instead, Sophie felt her temper spark. "So you've been following me?" "Protecting you. There's a difference." "Not from where I'm standing." Adrian studied her, and Sophie got the distinct impression he wasn't used to being challenged. Most people probably fell over themselves agreeing with him, or fled before they could disagree. She should probably do one or the other. Her mouth had other ideas. "I don't need protection," she said, "and I definitely didn't ask for it. Richard Castelaine has a history with young women who tell him no. Usually, that history ends badly for the women." "Then call the police." "The police." Adrian's smile was bitter, humorless. Richard's donated $500,000 to the police commissioner's re-election campaign. His lawyer plays golf with 3 judges. The system you're suggesting I use is owned by men like him. Sophie wanted to argue, but Daniel's voice whispered in her head again. "The system's rigged." "So what do you want me to do?" she asked instead. "Have dinner with me." Of all the things Sophie expected him to say, that wasn't on the list. "What?" "Dinner. Tonight." Adrian's tone suggested he was offering a business arrangement, not a date. "Somewhere public, where Richard's people will see, where they'll report back to him that you're with me. And that accomplishes what? It makes you mine publicly, which means Richard backs off permanently, or he answers to me." There was that word again, mine. Sophie's skin prickled. "I'm not anyone's." "I know." Adrian's voice softened slightly. "It's theater, Sophie. A performance to keep you safe. 2 hours of your time, a good meal, and Richard Castelaine becomes someone else's problem." "What's in it for you?" The question seemed to surprise him. Does there need to be something? People don't help for free. Especially not people like you. "People like me." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "What do you think you know about people like me? Enough!" Sophie shifted her backpack, anatomy textbooks weighing heavy. "I looked you up." "Did you?" Not a question. "What did you find?" "Not much, which tells me plenty." Adrian laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of real amusement. "Smart. I can see why you're in medical school. I'm in medical school because I worked my ass off, not because I'm smart at reading between lines. Both can be true." Adrian pulled out his phone, typed something, then held it out to her. 7 o'clock, Maria, Columbus Circle. Table's already reserved. Sophie looked at the phone without taking it. And if I say no, then you say no. I'm not Richard. I don't force women into anything. Adrian's jaw tightened. But understand that he won't stop looking. He knows you exist now, knows you rejected him, knows you're, he gestured vaguely at the medical school, vulnerable. Men like Richard, they see that as opportunity. The worst part was, Sophie believed him. She'd seen enough in her 26 years to know that predators recognized prey, and desperation smelled like blood in the water. One dinner, she said. One dinner. And then this is done. You've made your point, Richard backs off, and we never see each other again. Something flickered across Adrian's face, too quick to read. If that's what you want. It should be what she wanted. Sophie knew that. This man was dangerous, connected to things she didn't understand and didn't want to. One dinner, a performance for the right audience, and she could go back to her life of lectures and late shifts and slowly drowning in debt while pretending she had it under control. 7 o'clock, Sophie repeated. Adrian's smile was small but genuine. I'll pick you up. No, I'll meet you there. Sophie. I'll meet you there, she said firmly. Or there's no dinner. Adrian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Maria, 7 o'clock. Don't be late. He got back into the car without waiting for a response. The door closed, the engine purred, and the vehicle pulled away, leaving Sophie standing in the parking lot holding her backpack and wondering what the hell she'd just agreed to. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You'll need address. Check your apartment when you get home. Sophie stared at the message, then at the retreating taillights of Adrian's car. Her apartment. He knew where she lived. Of course he did. If he knew her class schedule, her address was nothing. The rational part of her brain screamed warnings. The part that had survived this long on instinct alone whispered something different. At least he's honest about it. Because that was the thing, wasn't it? Adrian Russo hadn't pretended to be anything other than what he was. No false charm, no manipulation disguised as kindness. Just cold facts delivered in a cold voice. I'm dangerous, Richard's worse, play along or don't. Sophie walked to her car, Maria's old Honda, borrowed indefinitely, and drove home on autopilot. Her apartment was a studio in a building that should have been condemned 10 years ago, but rent was cheap and it was close to campus. She climbed 3 flights of stairs, unlocked 2 deadbolts, and pushed open the door. A garment bag hung on the back of her only chair. Sophie approached it like it might explode. Inside was a dress, midnight blue, simple but clearly expensive. No label, nothing flashy, just quality fabric and expert tailoring. Her size exactly. A note was pinned to the hanger. You could wear anything and be beautiful. But Richard's people need to see that you're taken care of. Indulge me. Sophie sat on her bed staring at the dress, at the note, at the evidence that Adrian Russo had been in her apartment, had seen how she lived, the secondhand furniture, the textbooks stacked on milk crates, the refrigerator held shut with duct tape because the seal was broken and her landlord refused to fix it. She should be furious, violated, terrified. Instead, she found herself thinking about the way Adrian had looked at her in the parking lot, like she was a problem to solve, a variable in an equation, not prey, not opportunity. Just Sophie. And for reasons she didn't want to examine too closely, that mattered. Her phone buzzed again. Maria, coffee before your shift tomorrow? Sophie typed back. Can't. Have plans tonight. Good plans or bad plans? Sophie looked at the dress, at the note, at her reflection in the cracked mirror across the room, at the girl who'd buried her brother at 23 and decided to become a doctor anyway, who worked 3 jobs and still barely scraped by, who'd been invisible so long she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen. Not sure yet, she replied. Then she hung the dress in her closet next to the 2 other outfits she owned and tried not to think about what 7 o'clock would bring. Maria was the kind of restaurant Sophie had walked past 100 times without ever imagining she'd enter. The kind of place where reservations took months and a single appetizer cost more than her weekly grocery budget. She stood outside at 6:58, wearing the blue dress and her only pair of decent heels, feeling like an imposter. The dress fit perfectly. Of course it did. Miss Carter. A man in a suit appeared beside her, not Adrian, someone else, equally polished. Mr. Russo is already seated. This way. Sophie followed him through the entrance, past the hostess stand, into a dining room that managed to be both elegant and understated. Soft lighting, quiet conversations, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Every table was full, but they walked past all of them to a corner booth that offered privacy and a clear view of the entrance. Adrian stood as she approached. He'd traded the sweater for a dark suit, no tie, looking every inch the powerful man he supposedly was. His eyes traveled over her, assessing the dress, before meeting her gaze. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "You broke into my apartment. I had someone deliver a dress." "Same thing." "No," Adrian said. "It's not, but I understand why you'd see it that way." He gestured to the booth. "Will you sit anyway?" Sophie slid into the booth, and Adrian sat across from her. The man who'd escorted her in melted away. A waiter appeared instantly, pouring water, offering menus. Adrian ordered wine without asking Sophie's preference, something French and probably expensive. "You didn't ask what I wanted," Sophie pointed out. "You're right. I apologize. What would you prefer?" The easy acknowledgement caught her off guard. "I don't drink much. I have class in the morning." Adrian canceled the wine, ordered sparkling water instead, and the waiter vanished. Then they were alone, or as alone as you could be in a crowded restaurant, and Sophie had no idea what to say. Adrian solved the problem. "Tell me about medical school." "Why?" "Because I'm curious, and because we have 2 hours to fill." "Right, the performance." Sophie glanced around the restaurant, trying to spot whoever might be watching, reporting back to Richard. She saw nothing obvious, but that didn't mean much. "It's hard," she said finally. "A lot of memorization. A lot of feeling like everyone else belongs there except you." "Imposter syndrome, something like that." Sophie traced the rim of her water glass. "My classmates talk about their backup plans, MBA programs, law school, working for their parents' companies. I don't have a backup plan. This is it." "Why medicine?" The question was quiet, genuine. Sophie looked up, meeting Adrian's dark eyes. "My brother died when I was 23. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. He was 20, studying computer science, supposed to have his whole life ahead of him." She paused, the old grief settling familiar in her chest. "We couldn't afford the treatment. Not the real treatment, the kind that might have saved him. Just the bare minimum to make him comfortable while he died." Adrian said nothing, but something shifted in his expression. "Daniel told me to go to medical school, said someone should understand the system well enough to beat it, or at least to help people who couldn't help themselves." Sophie smiled, bitter. "Turns out medical school's just another system designed to keep people like me out." "But you're still there." "Yeah, I'm still there." She took a sip of water. "What about you? What's your story?" "Nothing as noble as yours." "Try me." Adrian leaned back, studying her. "I grew up in Brooklyn. My father ran numbers for the local syndicate. My mother cleaned houses. I learned early that the world was divided into people who had power and people who got crushed by it. So you decided to have power." "I decided not to get crushed." Adrian's tone was matter of fact. Everything else followed. The waiter returned, rattled off specials. Sophie let Adrian order for both of them, not because she wanted him to, but because the menu prices made her lightheaded and she didn't trust herself to choose. When they were alone again, she asked the question that had been nagging since the parking lot. "Why are you really doing this?" "I told you to keep Richard." "No. Why do you care? You don't know me. I'm nobody to you." Adrian was quiet for a long moment, then, "Richard Castellane represents everything I hate about men with money. He uses power to take what he wants, consequences be damned. Usually, that's none of my business. But when I see it happening in front of me, when I have the ability to stop it," he shrugged. "I stop it, even though it costs you nothing. Even though—" Sophie wanted to believe him. The scary thing was, she almost did. "And after tonight, after you've made your point, after tonight you go back to your life, medical school, anatomy exams, whatever shifts you're working." Adrian's eyes stayed locked on hers. "Unless you don't want to." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm offering help if you need it. No strings, no expectations. Just—" He paused. You're drowning in debt, working yourself to exhaustion, one bad month away from losing everything. I can fix that. Sophie's hands clenched under the table. I don't need fixing. Everyone needs help sometimes. Not from you. Why not from me? Because men like you don't help for free. The words came out sharper than intended. A couple at a nearby table glanced over. Sophie lowered her voice. There's always a cost. Always. You're right, Adrian said quietly. There usually is, but maybe not the cost you're imagining. Before Sophie could respond, the food arrived. Dishes she couldn't pronounce, plated like art. Adrian had ordered perfectly, somehow knowing she'd like the fish, the risotto, the vegetables that tasted nothing like the frozen bags she bought on sale. They ate in silence for a while, the tension easing into something almost comfortable. Tell me something else, Adrian said eventually. Something that has nothing to do with money or medical school or dead brothers. Sophie blinked. Like what? Anything. Something true. She thought about it, fork paused halfway to her mouth. I hate running, but I do it anyway. 3 miles every morning, no matter how tired I am, because it's the only time I feel like myself instead of just surviving. Adrian nodded. I restore old books, first editions, rare prints. It's methodical, precise. The opposite of everything else I do. That's unexpectedly normal. Disappointed? Little bit? Sophie smiled despite herself. I was expecting something more dramatic. Collection of vintage weapons, maybe. Underground fight club. I have those too. Really? No. Adrian's expression remained deadpan. But you believed me for a second. Sophie laughed, surprising herself. The sound felt foreign, like she'd forgotten how. When was the last time she'd laughed during a dinner that wasn't microwaved in her apartment? When was the last time someone had asked her about herself without wanting something in return? The meal continued. They talked about small things, Sophie's favorite professor who made neurology almost bearable, Adrian's opinion on the latest construction project reshaping the Manhattan skyline, the weather, books, the way the city changed when you weren't looking. Nothing heavy, nothing that mattered. It was nice. Sophie hated that it was nice. Dessert appeared, something chocolate and elaborate. Sophie ate half, then pushed it aside, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the evening was fading, leaving her aware of how surreal this all was. She was sitting in Maria, wearing a dress that cost more than her monthly rent, across from a man who'd all but admitted to being a criminal, pretending this was normal. Tired? Adrian asked. Long day. I'll take you home. I can get myself home. Sophie? His voice carried gentle exasperation. It's late, you're exhausted, and I have a car waiting. Let me. She should refuse, should maintain boundaries, keep distance, remember that this was supposed to be one night and nothing more. But her feet hurt, and the subway was 45 minutes in the wrong direction, and Adrian was looking at her like her comfort actually mattered. Fine, she said. They left the restaurant. Adrian's hand light on her lower back as they walked to the waiting car. The same driver from the parking lot held the door open. Sophie slid into leather seats that smelled expensive, and Adrian settled beside her, maintaining careful distance. Where to? The driver asked. Adrian looked at Sophie. She gave her address, watching for his reaction. There wasn't one. No judgment, no surprise, nothing. He simply relayed it to the driver, and they pulled into traffic. The city slid past the windows, lights blurring together. Sophie's reflection looked back at her from the glass. A girl in a borrowed dress, sitting in a borrowed life, trying to figure out how she'd ended up here. Question, she said. Did anyone actually see us? At the restaurant? Adrian's smile was slight. 3 of Richard's associates. 2 at the bar, 1 seated 4 tables over. So it worked. The performance. It worked. Which means this is over. If that's what you want, Adrian said again, the same words from the parking lot. Sophie turned to face him. Why do you keep saying that? Because it's true. This can be over. One night, a message delivered, your life goes back to normal. He paused. Or it can be something else. What else? I don't know yet. Adrian's honesty was unnerving. but I'd like to find out. The car stopped outside Sophie's building, engine idling. She should get out. Should thank him for dinner, for the intervention with Richard, for the dress she'd return tomorrow. Should close this chapter and never look back. Instead, she asked, "Why?" "Why what?" "Why do you care? Really, not the bullshit about stopping Richard. Why me?" Adrian studied her in the dim light filtering through the windows. "Because you looked at me like I was dangerous but helped you anyway. Because you didn't fawn or fear, you just—" He stopped, searching for words. "You saw me. Not the reputation, not the money. Just me. That doesn't happen often. And that's enough? To upend someone's life?" "I'm not upending anything. I'm offering an alternative." His voice was steady, certain. "You're drowning, Sophie. I can see it. Everyone can see it, but they look away because helping's inconvenient. I'm not looking away." Sophie's throat tightened. "I don't want to owe you." "You won't. That's not how this works." "Then how does it work?" "Honestly, I have no fucking idea." Adrian laughed, low and rough. "This isn't something I do, but I'm doing it anyway, and I'm asking you to consider doing it with me." The car felt too small, the air too thin. Sophie's hand found the door handle. "I need to think." "Take all the time you need." She got out, stood on the curb, the October cold biting through the dress. Adrian rolled down the window. "Keep the dress," he said. "It's yours." "Adrian, keep it." "And Sophie?" He waited until she met his eyes. "You're not drowning. You're surviving a system designed to drown you. There's a difference." The window rolled up. The car pulled away, leaving Sophie alone on her cracked sidewalk, wearing a dress worth more than her car, her mind spinning with questions she couldn't answer and didn't want to ask. Inside her apartment, she hung the dress carefully, sat on her bed, and pulled out her phone. No new messages, no demands or expectations, just silence. And somehow, that was scariest of all. Because Adrian Russo had offered her a lifeline, asked for nothing in return, and walked away like it was simple. Like helping didn't require leverage or debt, or the unspoken agreements Sophie had learned to recognize in every interaction with people who had what she needed. She fell asleep thinking about cold eyes that saw too much, and a voice that promised alternatives to drowning. When she woke 6 hours later to her alarm, there was a text from an unknown number. "Good luck on your anatomy exam." Sophie stared at it, at the casual intimacy of someone remembering what she'd mentioned once in passing. Then she got up, went for her run, and tried to pretend her life hadn't just shifted in ways she didn't understand. But the dress hanging in her closet called her a liar. And deep down, Sophie knew she'd see Adrian Russo again. The only question was whether she'd run toward him or away. Sophie aced the anatomy exam, which should have felt like a victory. Instead, she sat in the lecture hall afterward, staring at the test paper with its red 96% circled at the top, and felt nothing. The questions had been straightforward. Identify the branches of the facial nerve, trace the path of the vagus, label the chambers of the heart. Easy, clinical, memorized. What she couldn't memorize was the look in Adrian's eyes when he'd said, "You're not drowning." What she couldn't forget was how the dress had felt against her skin, expensive and foreign. What kept circling her thoughts was the text message that meant he'd been thinking about her at 6 in the morning, remembering details from a conversation over risotto. "Hey." Maria slid into the seat beside her. "You okay? You look like you just failed." 96. "Jesus, Sophie, what's wrong with you?" Maria grabbed the paper, scanned it, and whistled. "Meanwhile, I'm over here celebrating my 78 like it's a Nobel Prize. You did fine. I did passing. You did perfect, as usual." Maria studied her face. "Seriously, what's up? You've been weird since that gala." Sophie gathered her things slowly, buying time. She hadn't told Maria about the dinner, about Adrian showing up at the parking lot, about any of it. How could she? "Hey, remember that dangerous crime boss who saved me? Yeah, we had dinner and now he texts me, and I can't stop thinking about him." "Just tired," she said. "Liar." But Maria didn't push. They walked out together into the hallway where other students clustered around phones, comparing answers, complaining about the difficulty. Normal medical school chaos. Sophie's phone buzzed in her pocket. She waited until Maria peeled off toward her next class before checking it. How'd it go? Sophie stopped walking. Around her, people streamed past, oblivious. She typed back 96%. The response came seconds later. Congratulations, dinner to celebrate? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was the moment. She could say no, could draw the line, could go back to her life of lonely studying and double shifts and pretending she had everything under control. One word, no. And Adrian Russo would disappear from her life as quickly as he'd entered it. Can't. Working tonight. Where? Sophie hesitated, then typed, Mercury Diner, Lexington and 58th. 4 to midnight. She wasn't sure why she told him. Maybe because he'd asked instead of demanded. Maybe because part of her wanted to see what he'd do with the information. Maybe because she was tired of making every decision alone, carrying every burden by herself, surviving instead of living. Understood. Be safe. No demands, no expectations, just acknowledgement. Sophie shoved her phone back in her pocket and headed home to change into her diner uniform, trying not to analyze why that mattered. The Mercury Diner was everything Maria wasn't. Fluorescent lights, cracked vinyl booths, coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the 90s. Sophie had worked there for 18 months, knew every regular, could pour coffee and take orders in her sleep. It was mind-numbing and exhausting and exactly what she needed to stop thinking about anatomy exams and dangerous men who sent good morning texts. She clocked in at 3:58, tied her apron, and dove into the dinner rush. The Mercury served a strange mix of clientele. Office workers grabbing quick meals, elderly regulars who'd been coming for decades, late-night stragglers with nowhere else to go. Sophie moved between tables on autopilot, her brain half-occupied with memorizing the Krebs cycle for next week's biochemistry exam. Coffee, black, and the meatloaf special. Mr. Chen, Tuesday regular, same order for the past year. Coming up, scrambled eggs, wheat toast, side of bacon. Tourist couple, wouldn't tip well, never did. Be right out. The rhythm was soothing, predictable, safe. Sophie lost herself in it, grateful for the distraction, until the bell above the door chimed at 7:43 and Adrian Russo walked into the Mercury Diner like he owned it. He didn't belong. The expensive clothes, the way he moved, the careful assessment in his eyes, everything about him screamed wrong place, wrong context. Every head in the diner turned. Even the cook, Tommy, leaned out from the kitchen to stare. Sophie froze, coffee pot in hand, watching Adrian scan the room until he found her. He smiled, small and private, and slid into a booth by the window. Friend of yours? Diane, the other waitress on shift, materialized at Sophie's elbow. Because damn, something like that. Something like that gets you in trouble. Yeah. Sophie set down the coffee pot. Probably. She approached his booth slowly, order pad in hand, hyper-aware of everyone watching. Adrian looked up as she stopped beside the table, his expression neutral but his eyes warm. You shouldn't be here, Sophie said quietly. You told me where you worked. I didn't think you'd actually show up. Then you don't know me very well yet. Adrian picked up the laminated menu, scanned it without apparent judgment. What's good? Nothing. It's diner food. You're here 8 hours. You must eat something. Sophie's defenses cracked slightly. The French toast is decent. Breakfast for dinner. French toast it is. He set down the menu. And coffee. Black? How'd you know? You seem like a black coffee person. Adrian's smile widened. Is that profiling? Observation. Sophie scribbled the order, acutely aware of Diane pretending not to watch from behind the counter. It'll be about 10 minutes. I'm not in a hurry. Sophie walked away before she could say something stupid, put the order in with Tommy, and tried to focus on her other tables. But her awareness kept snagging on Adrian, on the way he sat perfectly still in the booth, on how he didn't pull out his phone or laptop like normal people waiting for food. He just sat there, watching the diner, watching her. Who is that? Tommy asked, sliding French toast across the pass. Never seen him before. Friend. Right, and I'm the Pope. Tommy lowered his voice. Sophie, that guy looks like he eats trust fund babies for breakfast. You sure you know what you're doing? No, Sophie admitted, But when do I ever? She delivered the French toast, poured coffee, and stood beside the booth with her order pad clutched like a shield. Can I sit? Adrian asked. I'm working. 5 minutes. You're due a break. How would you know? Labor laws. You've been on your feet for 4 hours. Sophie glanced at Diane, who made a shooing motion. Traitor. She slid into the booth across from Adrian, feeling the vinyl crackle beneath her. Why are you really here? She asked. Adrian cut into the French toast with surgical precision. You told me where to find you. I took that as an invitation. It wasn't. Then why tell me? Good question. Sophie didn't have a good answer. I don't know. I think you do. Adrian took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. This is actually decent. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not. You recommended it. He set down his fork. I've been thinking about what you said, about not wanting to owe me. And? And I understand, but I want to make something clear. Adrian's voice dropped, serious now. What I'm offering isn't a loan or a debt. It's a choice. Your choice. Nothing's free. Some things are. He paused. My mother cleaned houses for 20 years, worked herself to exhaustion for people who didn't know her name, didn't care if she ate lunch, didn't give a damn if she had to take 2 buses in the winter because she couldn't afford a car. When she got sick, those people she'd worked for, they disappeared. No help, no support, nothing. Sophie stayed quiet, sensing there was more. She died when I was 19, Adrian continued. Pneumonia that turned into sepsis because she waited too long to see a doctor, couldn't afford to miss work. I was already, he gestured vaguely, in the life, making money, but not enough, not fast enough. She died because the system you're trying to beat killed her. The words hung between them, heavy with old grief. Sophie recognized it. She carried the same weight for Daniel. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. Just understand that when I see someone fighting that same system, drowning in the same debt, working themselves to death for people who don't care, I remember. And if I can help, I do. Because of your mother. Because no one helped her. Adrian met her eyes. You remind me of her. Stubborn, proud, refusing to ask for what you need, even when you're falling apart. I'm not falling apart. Sophie, you're working 3 jobs, carrying a full course load, sleeping maybe 4 hours a night. You're one bad day from collapse. His voice was gentle but firm. That's not judgment. That's fact. Sophie wanted to argue, but the exhaustion she'd been holding at bay crashed over her suddenly. He was right. She was running on fumes and force of will, had been for years, and eventually something would give. What do you want from me? She asked finally. I want you to let me help. Tuition, rent, whatever you need to focus on school instead of survival. Adrian raised a hand before she could protest. Before you say no, hear the rest. I'm not asking for anything in return. No expectations. No strings. You finish medical school, become a doctor, help people the way you couldn't help your brother. That's it. Nobody does that. I do. Why? Because I can. Because you deserve better than this. Adrian gestured around the diner. Because watching you exhaust yourself trying to survive makes me angry at a system I can't punch. Despite everything, Sophie almost smiled. You want to punch the medical education system? Among other things. They sat in silence for a moment. Around them, the diner hummed with normalcy. Orders being called, dishes clattering, the eternal coffee machine gurgling. Sophie's break was almost over. She should get back to work, should end this conversation before it went somewhere she couldn't take back. Instead, she asked, what would it look like? The help. Adrian's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. Relief, maybe. However you want. I can pay your tuition directly to the school. Set up an account for living expenses. Hell, I'll hire you as a consultant if it makes you feel better about accepting money. A consultant for what? I'm sure I can find something. You're smart, resourceful. I could use someone who knows how hospitals work, how doctors think. He was bullshitting, and they both knew it. Point is, We can structure it however keeps your pride intact. Sophie laughed, short and sharp. My pride's already pretty damaged. No, it's not. You're one of the most self-possessed people I've ever met. You don't know me. I'm trying to. Adrian leaned forward slightly. Let me. The question beneath the words was clear. This wasn't just about money or help or fixing systems. This was about connection, about two people who recognized something broken in each other and wondered if together they might be less damaged. Sophie should say no, should protect herself, maintain distance, remember that Adrian Russo was dangerous and connected to things that got people killed, should listen to every instinct screaming warnings. I need to think about it, she said instead. Fair enough? And I need you to understand, if I say yes, it's because I'm out of options, not because I trust you. Also fair. And if you turn out to be like every other man who's offered to help, I'll... Sophie stopped, not sure how to finish the threat. You'll what? Adrian's eyes gleamed with something like amusement. I'll find a way to make you regret it. Good. He finished his coffee. I'd expect nothing less. Diane appeared beside the table, refilling Adrian's cup without being asked. You two need anything else? Just the check, Adrian said. On the house. Boss says any friend of Sophie's eats free. Sophie's head snapped toward the counter where Marcus, the night manager, waved from behind the register. She made a mental note to kill him later. Adrian pulled out his wallet anyway, extracted $200 bills and left them on the table. That's too much, Sophie protested. Tip for excellent service. He slid out of the booth, stood, buttoned his jacket with practiced ease. Think about what I said. No pressure, no timeline. Just consider it. He left before Sophie could respond, the bell chiming his exit. Diane swooped in immediately, snatching up the bills. Holy shit! He left $200 for French toast and coffee. Give that back. Hell no. We're splitting this. Diane pocketed the money. Who is he really? I told you. A friend. Friends don't leave $200 tips. Sugar daddies do. He's not... Sophie stopped. Because what was Adrian exactly? Savior? Threat? Something else she didn't have words for? It's complicated. Uncomplicated. That man is dangerous and into you and probably both a terrible idea and the best thing that could happen to you. Diane squeezed her shoulder. Just be careful, okay? Sophie nodded, but careful had stopped being an option the moment Adrian Russo decided she was worth saving. The rest of her shift blurred together. She went through the motions, smiled at customers, refilled coffee, and thought about everything Adrian had said, about his mother, about systems designed to crush people, about help with no strings attached. Part of her wanted to believe it was possible. The larger part, the part that had learned through hard experience that nothing was free, stayed skeptical. But when she clocked out at midnight and found another text waiting, get home safe. Sophie felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it. She took the subway home, climbed her 3 flights of stairs, and collapsed on her bed without changing out of her uniform. Her phone sat on the nightstand, screen dark, full of potential responses she couldn't quite form. Finally, at 1:07 a.m., she typed, I'll think about it. But I have questions. Ask them. A nod over text. In person. Tomorrow? Sophie stared at the message, at how quickly he responded, like he'd been waiting for her reply. Tomorrow was Wednesday. She had classes until 3, no shifts scheduled, free evening, which almost never happened. Where? My place. I'll send a car at 4. Every survival instinct she'd honed over 26 years of living screamed no. Going to Adrian Russo's home crossed a line from public performance to private reality. Dinner at Maria had been theater. His apartment would be truth. Okay, she typed before she could overthink it. Sleep came harder than usual. Sophie lay in the dark, listening to her neighbors through the thin walls, and wondered what version of herself she was becoming. The smart choice was obvious. Keep Adrian at arm's length, refuse his help, survive on her own terms the way she'd always done. But that version of herself was so tired, bone deep, soul-crushing, tired of fighting every single day just to stay afloat. Maybe there was another version, one that accepted help without seeing it as surrender. One that let someone else carry some of the weight, just for a while. Sophie fell asleep still arguing with herself and dreamed of drowning in crystal clear water, watching the surface get farther away until a hand reached down and pulled her up. Wednesday morning arrived too fast. Sophie went for her run, sat through biochemistry and physiology lectures without retaining much, and found herself standing outside her building at 3:58 wearing the same jeans and sweater she'd worn to class. The blue dress hung in her closet, unworn since that first dinner, too nice for her life. The black car pulled up at exactly 4 o'clock. Same driver as before. Same polite nod as he opened the door. Sophie slid into the back seat, and they drove north through afternoon traffic, into neighborhoods she recognized from medical school rotations but had never actually lived in. Adrian's building was in Tribeca, all glass and steel and understated wealth, the kind of place where you needed a code just to enter the lobby. The driver pulled into an underground garage, escorted her to a private elevator, used a keycard to activate it. The doors closed, and Sophie watched the numbers climb, 12, 15, 18, until they stopped at 22. The elevator opened directly into an apartment. Not a hallway, not a foyer, just straight into a massive open-plan living space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Sophie stepped out slowly, taking it in. Hardwood floors, minimal furniture, built-in bookshelves lining one wall, a kitchen that looked like it had never been used. Everything was clean, expensive, and somehow impersonal. Like a showroom, not a home. "You came." Sophie turned to find Adrian emerging from what looked like a home office, dressed casually in dark jeans and a gray Henley. No suit, no armor, just him, looking almost normal except for the eyes that still saw too much. "I said I would. People say a lot of things." He gestured to the living area. "Sit. Can I get you anything? Water, coffee, something stronger?" "Water's fine." Adrian disappeared into the kitchen while Sophie perched on the edge of a leather sofa that probably cost more than her entire apartment's contents. She heard the refrigerator open, glasses clinking, water pouring. He returned with 2 glasses, handed her one, and sat in the chair across from her, maintaining distance. "Questions?" he prompted. Sophie took a sip of water, organizing her thoughts. "If I accept your help, what happens when I'm done with school? Do I owe you then? No? Just no? Just no. You graduate, you start your residency, you move on with your life. We can stay in touch or not, your choice." "That doesn't make sense. Nobody gives away that kind of money without expecting something. I'm not nobody." Adrian's voice was patient. "And I'm not giving it away. I'm investing in someone who's going to save lives, help people, make the system slightly less terrible. That's return enough." Sophie wanted to believe him. "What if I fail out?" "You won't." "But what if I do?" "Then you tried. No debt, no obligation." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Sophie, I know you're waiting for the catch. There isn't one. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. Using some of it to keep you from drowning doesn't cost me anything that matters. It matters to me." "I know, which is why I'm offering, not demanding." Adrian paused. "What else?" "What do you get out of this, really?" "Peace of mind, the knowledge that someone who deserves better is getting it. A chance to fix something I couldn't fix for my mother." He held her gaze. "And maybe, if you're willing, the chance to know you better." There it was, the truth beneath the altruism. Sophie set down her water glass. "You want something from me. I want to see where this goes, whatever this is." Adrian's honesty was disarming. "But that's separate from the help. You can take the money and never speak to me again, and I'll consider it money well spent. Or you can take the money and have dinner with me sometimes. Let me take you to places that aren't the Mercury Diner, and we figure out what we are to each other. And if I don't want to figure that out, then don't. I'm not Richard Castellane. I don't force or manipulate. You want me gone, say the word." Sophie studied him, this dangerous man offering salvation with no visible strings. She thought about Daniel, who'd died because they couldn't afford to save him. About her mother, who'd worked herself to death trying to keep them fed. About every system designed to crush people like her family, like Adrian's mother, like everyone who started from nothing and stayed there. "I have conditions," she said finally. Adrian's expression didn't change, but she sensed relief. "Name them." First, the money goes into an account I control. You don't get access, don't get to track how I spend it. Agreed. Second, if I tell you to back off, you back off. No questions, no arguments. Agreed. Third, this doesn't make me yours. I'm not a possession or a pet project. I'm a person who's accepting help because I'm out of options, not because I belong to anyone. Understood. Though for the record, I never thought you were mine to own, just mine to protect. Adrian's smile was slight. Semantics, maybe, but important ones. Sophie ignored the flutter in her chest at mine to protect. Fourth, you tell me the truth about who you are, what you do, all of it. I'm not stupid. I know you're connected to things that aren't legal. If I'm accepting help from you, I need to know what I'm accepting. This time Adrian hesitated. That's fair, but understand that some truths are dangerous to know. I'll take that risk. Okay. He stood, walked to the bookshelves, and pulled down what looked like a first edition of something old. Behind it was a safe. He punched in a code, extracted a folder, and brought it back to the coffee table. My legitimate businesses, he said, opening the folder. Real estate development, 3 restaurants, a construction company, import-export operation, all legal, all profitable, all clean. And the illegitimate ones? Adrian closed the folder. I run most of the independent operations in Lower Manhattan. Gambling, protection, some loan services. I don't touch drugs, don't traffic people, don't hurt anyone who doesn't come at me first, but I'm not going to pretend I'm a saint. Protection. You mean extortion. I mean I make sure certain businesses don't get robbed, don't have problems with suppliers, don't suddenly fail health inspections because someone didn't pay the right person. In exchange, they pay me. It's a service. It's illegal. Most profitable things are. Adrian's gaze didn't waver. I'm not asking you to approve, just to understand who I am and what I do. The money I'm offering you comes from the legitimate businesses. Rental properties, mostly. Nothing that'll put you at risk. Sophie processed this, the clinical breakdown of a criminal empire delivered with the same calm he'd used to order French toast. Have you killed anyone? Yes. The answer was simple, direct, no hesitation. Sophie's breath caught. Recently? Define recently. This year. No, last year, twice. Both were people who came after me or mine first. Self-defense, if the courts had ever been involved. Which they weren't. Sophie should run, should thank him for his honesty and get the hell out. Go back to her safe, legal, drowning life. Instead, she asked, "What's the worst thing you've ever done?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. I once had a man beaten so badly he needed reconstructive surgery. He'd been running a trafficking operation out of a building I owned. When I found out, I told him to stop. He didn't, so I made sure he couldn't anymore. That doesn't sound like the worst thing. It's not, but the worst thing, that's not something I'll tell you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. His eyes were dark, honest. I'm not a good man, Sophie. I'm useful. I'm powerful. And sometimes I do the right thing for the wrong reasons. But good? No. Then why should I trust you? Because I'm honest about what I am. Because I've never lied to you, and I won't start now. Because... He stopped, searching for words. Because you see me clearly and haven't run yet. That means something. Sophie stood, walked to the windows, looked out at the city sprawling below. Somewhere down there, people were working 3 jobs, drowning in debt, losing family members to systems that didn't care. Somewhere down there was the girl she'd been 3 weeks ago, before a gala and a dangerous man, and an offer that seemed too good to be true. I want to say no, she said quietly. Every smart part of me says this is a terrible idea. I know. But I'm so tired, Adrian, and you're offering rest. How do I turn that down? She heard him stand, felt him approach but not touch. He stopped a few feet away, giving her space. You don't have to decide now, he said. Yes, I do. If I leave here without deciding, I'll talk myself out of it, convince myself I can survive on my own, that I don't need help. Sophie turned to face him. But I do need it. I hate that I do, but I'm not stupid enough to refuse it out of pride. So yes, I'll accept your help. with all my conditions and the understanding that if you turn out to be lying, I will find a way to hurt you." Adrian's smile was genuine this time, reaching his eyes. I'd expect nothing less. They stood there in his apartment, the city glittering below them, two people from different worlds making a deal that probably wouldn't end well. Sophie knew she was crossing a line, stepping into something she didn't fully understand. But drowning was exhausting, and Adrian's hand was steady. And maybe, just maybe, she deserved to stop fighting long enough to breathe. "I'll have my lawyer draw up paperwork," Adrian said. "Account in your name, funds transferred by end of week. How much do you need?" Sophie did quick math. Tuition's $40,000, rent for the year, another $18,000, living expenses, say $2,000 a month. Call it $80,000 total. I'll make it an even 100, emergency buffer. That's too much. It's insurance. You don't touch it unless you need it. Adrian pulled out his phone, typed something. Done. You'll have account details tomorrow. Just like that. $100,000, promised and delivered with less ceremony than ordering coffee. Sophie felt dizzy. "I should go, she said. "The car will take you home, or—" Adrian hesitated. "You could stay for dinner. I can cook, despite what the pristine kitchen suggests." Sophie should leave, should maintain boundaries, keep things transactional. But the apartment was warm, and she was curious, and part of her wanted to see Adrian Russo cook dinner in his unused kitchen. "What are you making?" she asked. His smile was quick, surprised. "What do you like?" "Anything that isn't ramen or peanut butter." Low bar. Adrian moved toward the kitchen. "How about pasta? Simple, hard to mess up. You can actually cook? My mother taught me. Said I should always be able to feed myself, because relying on anyone else was a weakness." He pulled ingredients from the refrigerator, fresh pasta, vegetables, cheese. She was wrong about a lot of things, but that lesson stuck. Sophie found herself following him, leaning against the kitchen island while Adrian worked with efficient precision. He moved like someone who'd done this 1,000 times, muscle memory taking over. It was strange, watching this man who ordered beatings and ran criminal operations dice tomatoes like it was meditation. "Tell me something," she said. "What?" "Something true, like at the restaurant." Adrian considered while he heated olive oil in a pan. "I hate violence, always have. But I'm good at it, and people expect it, so I deliver." "That's depressing." "Most true things are." He added garlic to the pan, and the smell filled the kitchen. "Your turn. Something true." Sophie thought about it. "Sometimes I resent Daniel for dying, for making me promise to become a doctor, for giving me this impossible goal that's eating my life. I love him, miss him every day, but I also hate him a little. That's not uncommon. Grief's complicated. You sound like a therapist. I've seen a few. Occupational hazard." Adrian stirred the pasta into boiling water. "After my mother died, I was— angry isn't the right word. Furious. At her for not getting help sooner, at myself, for not having money fast enough, at the world for being so fundamentally unfair. Took me years to sort through it." "Did you? Sort through it?" "Mostly. Some things you just learn to carry." They were quiet while Adrian finished cooking. The ease of it surprised Sophie. How comfortable silence could be with someone she barely knew, but who seemed to understand her anyway. He plated pasta with vegetables and parmesan, poured wine for himself and water for her, and they sat at the dining table that looked like it had never been used. The food was good. Simple but well made, the kind of cooking that spoke of practice rather than performance. Sophie ate slowly, savoring every bite, aware this was the second real meal she'd had in weeks. "Question," Adrian said. "Why medicine? Not just because of Daniel. What drew you to it?" Sophie set down her fork. "Control, maybe. If I understand how bodies work, how to fix them, then maybe I can control something. Save people Daniel couldn't be saved." She paused. "That sounds stupid." "It doesn't. It sounds human." They talked through dinner, the conversation flowing easier than it should between a crime boss and a medical student. Adrian asked about her classes, her favorite subjects, what kind of doctor she wanted to be. Sophie asked about his businesses, how he'd built them, what he did when he wasn't running an empire. I restore books, he admitted. First editions, rare prints. It's methodical, requires patience. The opposite of everything else I do. Can I see? Adrian looked surprised, but led her to the office she'd seen earlier. Inside were shelves lined with old books, a work table covered in tools and supplies, and the smell of leather and old paper. He picked up a volume carefully, showed her the cracked spine he was repairing. It's an 1847 edition of Jane Eyre, he explained. Found it at an estate sale, cover falling off, pages loose. When I'm done, it'll be preserved for another 100 years. Sophie touched the book gently. This is beautiful. It's patience. Most things worth doing are. They stood close in the small office, and Sophie became acutely aware of Adrian's proximity, the warmth radiating from him, the way his attention felt when focused entirely on her. Not predatory like Richard Castellane's had been. Just present, seeing her completely. I should go, she said, not moving. Probably. Neither of them stepped back. Adrian's hand came up slowly, giving her time to retreat, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The touch was brief, careful, but Sophie felt it everywhere. Thank you, she said quietly. For dinner, for everything. You don't need to thank me. I do. You're saving my life. No, you're saving your own life. I'm just making it slightly easier. Adrian's hand dropped. The car's waiting, but Sophie? Yeah? This doesn't have to be complicated. Whatever we are, whatever this becomes, we decide. Nobody else. Sophie nodded, not trusting her voice. She gathered her things, let Adrian walk her to the elevator, felt his eyes on her as the doors closed. The ride down was silent. The drive home passed in a blur. By the time Sophie climbed her 3 flights of stairs and collapsed on her bed, it was past 10, and her phone had 3 new messages. From Adrian. Account details attached. Call if you need anything. From Maria. Coffee tomorrow? You've been MIA. And from an unknown number, stay away from Adrian Russo. This is your only warning. Sophie stared at the last message, ice forming in her veins. She screenshot it, sent it to Adrian, and waited. His response came in seconds. Do you recognize the number? No, I'll handle it. Lock your doors. Don't go anywhere alone tomorrow. Adrian, please, Sophie, just this once. Let me protect you. She wanted to argue, to insist she could handle herself. But the message sat on her phone like a threat, and suddenly Adrian's world felt a lot closer than she'd anticipated. Okay, she typed. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Sophie lay awake, door locked, phone on her nightstand, and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. Adrian had been honest about the danger, about who he was and what he did. She'd chosen to accept his help anyway, knowing the risks. But knowing and experiencing were different things. The threatening text made it real in a way dinner and conversation hadn't. Somewhere across the city, Adrian was probably awake too, making calls, pulling strings, doing whatever dangerous men did when threats emerged. And Sophie, caught between 2 worlds, could only wait to see which one would claim her first. The black SUV appeared outside Sophie's building at 7 the next morning, idling at the curb like a patient predator. She spotted it from her window while lacing up her running shoes, debated ignoring it, then grabbed her phone. I told you I run alone, she texted Adrian. The response was immediate. And I told you not to go anywhere alone. Marcus will keep his distance. You won't even know he's there. I'll know. There's a black tank parked outside my building. Marcus drives a gray sedan. Look again. Sophie peered out the window. Sure enough, a nondescript gray Honda sat 3 cars down, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. The SUV belonged to her neighbor, the one who worked construction and left before dawn every Thursday. She felt stupid and annoyed in equal measure. Fine. But he stays back. He will. Be safe. Sophie left her apartment, stretched on the sidewalk, and started her usual route through the park. The gray sedan followed at a careful distance, never close enough to crowd, but always visible in her peripheral vision. Marcus, whoever he was, knew his job. By the time Sophie hit mile 2, she'd almost forgotten he was there. Almost. But the threatening text from last night sat heavy in her mind, making every shadow feel dangerous, every stranger a potential threat. She pushed harder, legs burning, lungs screaming, trying to outrun the fear that had taken root somewhere in her chest. Her phone buzzed at mile 3. She slowed to check it, half expecting another warning. Instead, it was her bank. A notification that $100,000 had been deposited into a new account under her name. Sophie stopped running entirely, staring at the screen, at the number that represented more money than she'd seen in her entire life. Real. This was real. Adrian had actually done it. She stood on the jogging path, other runners streaming past, and felt the full weight of what she'd accepted crash over her. This wasn't just help anymore. This was commitment, entanglement, stepping fully into Adrian Russo's world, whether she was ready or not. Sophie finished her run on autopilot, Marcus's gray sedan shadowing her home. She showered, dressed for class, and walked to the medical school with her awareness split between anatomy notes and the security detail she couldn't see but knew was there. It should have felt suffocating. Instead, it felt like being seen, like mattering to someone in a way she hadn't since Daniel died. That thought scared her more than the threatening text. Classes passed in a blur of neural pathways and cardiac physiology. Sophie took notes mechanically, her mind circling the same questions. Who'd sent the message? What did they want? And why did warning her away from Adrian feel more dangerous than staying close to him? Maria cornered her after their last lecture. Okay, seriously, what's going on with you? Nothing, just tired. You're always tired. This is different. Maria lowered her voice. Does this have anything to do with that guy from the gala? The one you won't talk about? Sophie wanted to deny it, to keep her worlds separate. But Maria had been her only real friend through 2 years of medical school, had covered shifts and shared notes and never asked for anything in return. She deserved some version of the truth. Maybe, Sophie admitted. It's complicated. Complicated how? Complicated like he's married, or complicated like he's actually a serial killer? Complicated like he's helping me with tuition, and I don't know what that makes us. Maria's eyes went wide. Wait, tuition? Sophie, that's... How much are we talking? Enough to finish school without working myself to death. Holy shit. Maria grabbed her arm, pulled her into an empty study room. Please tell me you're being careful. Please tell me this isn't some sugar daddy situation where he owns you now. It's not like that. He's... Sophie struggled to explain what Adrian was, what this arrangement meant. He's giving me a chance to focus on school. No strings, no expectations. Nobody gives away tuition money with no strings. I know, that's what I said, but he was honest about it, about what he wants, what he doesn't want. I trust him. The words surprised her. When had that happened? When had dangerous Adrian Russo, with his cold eyes and criminal empire, become someone she trusted? Maria studied her face. You like him? I don't... Sophie, you're glowing right now just talking about him. You like him. Even if I did, which I'm not saying I do, it's irrelevant. This is a business arrangement. Business arrangements don't make you glow, Maria sighed. Just be careful, okay? Men with money always want something, even if they say they don't. Sophie nodded, gathered her books, and tried to ignore the truth in Maria's words. Because Adrian did want something. He'd admitted as much. He wanted to see where this went, whatever this was. The question was whether Sophie wanted the same thing. Her phone buzzed as she left the building. Adrian, dinner tonight? Somewhere public if you prefer. Sophie typed back. Where? Your choice. Anywhere in the city. She thought about it, about what she actually wanted versus what was safe. Safe would be another public restaurant, performing their charade for whoever might be watching. But Safe felt dishonest after last night, after pasta in his kitchen and books in his office, and the way he'd touched her hair like she might break. Your place, she typed. But I'm cooking. The pause before his response felt significant. You don't have to... I want to. Tell me what's in your kitchen. Adrian sent a photo of his refrigerator and pantry, both impressively stocked for someone who claimed never to cook. Sophie made a mental shopping list, then revised it when she remembered she now had $100,000 sitting in her bank account. The thought still felt surreal. I'll be there at 6, she sent, and tell Marcus he can take the rest of the day off. I know my way around a grocery store. Marcus stays. But he'll keep his distance. Sophie wanted to argue but recognized the futility. Adrian was protecting her, and after last night's text, she couldn't entirely blame him. Fine, but he doesn't follow me inside Whole Foods. That's my line. Deal. She spent the afternoon between classes researching recipes on her phone, something simple but impressive. The irony wasn't lost on her. A week ago, she'd been eating ramen for the fourth night straight, and now she was planning to cook dinner for a man who could probably hire a Michelin-starred chef. At 5:30, Sophie left campus and walked to the nearest Whole Foods, Marcus's gray sedan trailing behind. Inside, surrounded by organic vegetables and artisanal cheeses, she felt the full absurdity of her new reality. She had money now, real money. She could buy the good olive oil, the fresh mozzarella, the basil that cost $8 a bunch. She bought it all, plus ingredients for tiramisu, because if she was doing this, she was doing it right. The total came to $73, more than she'd normally spend on groceries in 2 weeks, and she didn't even flinch when she swiped her card. Marcus appeared at her elbow as she left the store. Up close, he was older than she'd expected, maybe 50, with gray in his hair and kind eyes that didn't match his intimidating build. "Miss Carter," he said quietly. "The car's this way. I can take the subway. Mr. Russo would prefer if you didn't, given recent events." The threatening text. Right. Sophie followed Marcus to the sedan, let him load her groceries in the trunk, and settled into the back seat for the drive to Tribeca. He didn't try to make conversation, which she appreciated. The silence gave her time to wonder what the hell she was doing. Cooking dinner for Adrian Russo. In his apartment. Alone. This had crossed so far past professional boundaries it was practically in another state. But she wanted to. That was the truth she couldn't avoid. She wanted to cook for him, wanted to see his reaction, wanted to exist in his space without the weight of performance or transaction. Just two people sharing a meal, normal and simple and nothing like what they actually were. The elevator ride to the 22nd floor felt shorter this time. The doors opened into Adrian's apartment, where he stood waiting, still in work clothes, dark slacks, white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking unfairly good for someone who'd probably spent the day doing illegal things. "You brought groceries," he observed. "I said I was cooking." Sophie moved past him into the kitchen, started unpacking bags. "I'm making chicken piccata and tiramisu. Hope you're hungry." "Starving." Adrian leaned against the counter, watching her work. "Can I help?" "You can stay out of my way and tell me where things are." He smiled, that small private expression she was starting to recognize. "Pans are in the lower cabinet, knives in the drawer to your left. Anything else?" "Wine glasses. I changed my mind about not drinking." Adrian retrieved 2 glasses, poured white wine without asking what she wanted. Sophie sipped it while she prepped chicken, sliced lemons, minced garlic. The kitchen smelled like her childhood, like the rare nights when her mother had energy after work to make real food instead of boxed meals. "Tell me about the text," she said, not looking up from her cutting board. The number was a burner, untraceable. Adrian's tone was careful, measured, but the message came 40 minutes after you left here last night, which means someone's watching either you or me, probably both. "And you think it's Richard. Richard or someone who works for him. He's not happy about our very public relationship. We don't have a relationship. He doesn't know that. Neither does anyone else who saw us at Maria or heard about my visit to the Mercury." Adrian paused. "For all intents and purposes, Sophie, you're mine now, which makes you a target." There was that word again, mine. Sophie set down her knife. "I didn't sign up to be a target." "I know, which is why I'm handling it." "How?" "By making it clear that touching you means war." Adrian's voice went cold, the warmth draining out of it entirely. "Richard operates on reputation and fear. Right now he thinks scaring you will make me back down. He's wrong." Sophie should be terrified, should recognize this for what it was, 2 powerful men playing games with her safety as the stakes. Instead, she felt something else. Anger, maybe, or determination. "What if I don't want to be something you fight over?" "Then tell me what you want instead." She turned to face him fully. "I want to finish medical school. I want to help people. I want to not be afraid every time my phone buzzes." Her voice cracked slightly. "I want to stop feeling like I'm drowning." Adrian moved then, closing the distance between them, but stopped just short of touching her. You're not drowning anymore. I've got you. For how long? Until Richard gets bored? Until the next threat comes? Sophie's frustration boiled over. You can't protect me forever. Adrian, eventually I'll have to stand on my own. Then I'll teach you how. How to see threats coming, how to handle them, how to survive in a world that's rigged against you. His eyes were intense, searching hers. You want to not be afraid? I can give you that, but it means stepping deeper into my world, not away from it. That's insane. Probably, but it's honest. Adrian's hand came up, cupped her face gently. I told you I wanted to see where this goes. This is where it goes, into complicated, dangerous territory that neither of us planned on. You can walk away right now, take the money and run. Or you can stay and let me show you how to fight back. Sophie's heart hammered against her ribs. Every rational thought screamed at her to leave, to cash out while she still could, to go back to her safe drowning instead of this dangerous salvation. But she'd never been good at rational decisions. Teach me, she said. Adrian's smile was sharp, pleased. After dinner. Right now, something's burning. Sophie spun back to the stove where the garlic had gone from golden to dark brown. She swore, dumped it, started over. Adrian stayed close but didn't interfere, just refilled her wine and watched her work with an attention that felt physical. They didn't talk much while she cooked, the kitchen filled with the smell of lemon and capers, butter and wine. Sophie plated the chicken over pasta, garnished with parsley, and carried both plates to the dining table. Adrian had set it while she wasn't looking. Real napkins, proper silverware, candles he must have dug out from somewhere. You didn't have to do all this, Sophie said. You're cooking for me. Seemed only fair. They ate slowly, the food better than it had any right to be considering Sophie had learned the recipe an hour ago from YouTube. Adrian complimented every bite, asked questions about technique, made her laugh with stories about his mother's disastrous attempts at American food when they'd first immigrated. She tried to make a Thanksgiving turkey once, he said. Followed the instructions exactly, except she didn't realize you were supposed to remove the giblets first. The whole apartment smelled like burnt organs for a week. Sophie nearly choked on her wine. That's horrific. That's poverty. You make do with what you know. Adrian's expression softened. She tried, though. Always tried to give me normal, even when normal was impossible. Daniel did that too. Pretended everything was fine, even when he was dying. Sophie pushed pasta around her plate. I hated it. Wanted him to be angry, to fight, to rage against how unfair it all was. But he just smiled, said he was glad I'd be okay. You think he'd approve of this? Of me? Sophie considered it honestly. I think he'd tell me to be careful but wouldn't try to stop me. Daniel believed in making your own choices, living with the consequences. Smart man. He was. Way smarter than me. I doubt that. Adrian set down his fork. You're in medical school, working 3 jobs, surviving on pure stubbornness. That takes intelligence and strength most people don't have. Or stupidity, jury's still out. They finished dinner, moved to the tiramisu Sophie had made while the chicken cooked. It was good, not perfect, but good enough. Adrian had 2 servings, which felt like a victory. After, while they cleaned up together, Sophie asked the question that had been circling her mind since his offer. How do you teach someone to not be afraid? By showing them they're stronger than they think, and by making sure they know how to handle the things that scare them. Adrian dried the last dish, set it aside. Come on, I'll show you. He led her to a room she hadn't noticed before, past the office with the books. Inside was a small gym, weight bench, punching bag, mats on the floor, and along one wall, a locked cabinet. Adrian opened it, revealing an array of items that made Sophie's breath catch. Knives, a handgun, pepper spray, a taser, tools of violence, organized and maintained. I'm not asking you to use these, he said quietly, but I am asking you to know how they work. Knowledge removes fear. Sophie stared at the cabinet's contents. You want to teach me to shoot? Among other things, how to throw a punch without breaking your hand, how to get out of a grab, how to read a room, and know when danger's coming. Adrian pulled out the taser, showed her how to hold it. Basic self-defense. Enough that if someone comes at you and I'm not there, you're not helpless. This is crazy. This is survival. He set the taser in her hand, adjusted her grip. You said you wanted to stop being afraid. Fear comes from helplessness. Take away the helplessness, and the fear starts to fade. Sophie turned the taser over in her hands, felt its weight. When do we start? Now, if you want, or we can wait. Your choice. She thought about the threatening text, about Richard Castellane's grabbing hand, about every time she'd felt powerless and small and at someone else's mercy. Now. Adrian smiled, something fierce and approving in his expression. Good. First lesson, awareness. Most people walk through the world half asleep. You need to see everything. He spent the next hour teaching her to observe, to notice details most people missed. How to scan a room and identify exits. How to read body language and spot aggressive intent before it became action. How to trust her instincts instead of politeness. Someone makes you uncomfortable, you don't smile and play nice, Adrian said. You create distance, you position yourself near exits, you make it clear you're aware and ready. That sounds exhausting. It becomes second nature, like checking both ways before crossing the street. They moved on to physical defense. Adrian showed her how to break a wrist grab, how to use her elbow as a weapon, how to go for vulnerable spots if someone got too close. He was patient, correcting her form, never making her feel stupid when she messed up. Again, he said after she'd practiced the wrist break technique a dozen times. But this time, commit. Really pull away like you mean it. Sophie tried again, and this time when Adrian grabbed her wrist, she twisted hard and broke free. The movement felt powerful, satisfying. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt dangerous instead of endangered. They trained until Sophie's muscles ached and sweat plastered her hair to her forehead. Adrian called a break, tossed her a water bottle, and leaned against the wall. You're a natural, he observed. I'm a mess. Same thing sometimes. He studied her with that unreadable expression. How do you feel? Sophie took inventory, tired, sore, exhilarated. Like, maybe I'm not as helpless as I thought. You were never helpless, just unprepared. Adrian pushed off the wall. We'll do this 3 times a week if you want, more if you have time. I want to learn the gun. Not yet. Hand to hand first, weapons later. You need to be comfortable with violence before you hold something that makes it easy. Sophie nodded, understanding the logic even if part of her wanted to skip ahead. Thank you for this. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you can actually throw a proper punch. She laughed, surprised by how normal this felt. Training in self-defense with a crime boss should be surreal, terrifying. Instead, it felt like taking control, like fighting back against a world that had been pushing her down for years. They moved back to the living room, both of them tired and comfortable in the silence. Sophie curled into the corner of the couch, and Adrian sat on the opposite end, maintaining that careful distance he always kept unless she invited him closer. Question, Sophie said after a while. Always with the questions. Why aren't you married, or in a relationship, or whatever people like you do? Adrian's expression flickered with something. Surprise, maybe, or amusement? People like me? Rich, powerful, unfairly attractive. Sophie gestured vaguely. You could have anyone. Anyone doesn't interest me. Specific people do, and they're rare. He paused. I was engaged once, 7 years ago. She wanted normal, a husband who came home at reasonable hours, who didn't have blood on his hands. I couldn't give her that. What happened? She left, married a lawyer, had 2 kids, lives in Connecticut. Last I heard, she's happy. Do you regret it? No, she deserved better than what I could offer. We both knew it. Adrian's eyes found hers. But I learned something from that relationship. Lying about what I am never works. Honesty might be brutal, but at least it's fair. Sophie understood what he was really saying. This, whatever this was between them, only worked if they both accepted reality. He was dangerous, connected to illegal things, not someone she could bring home to meet parents she didn't have. And she was drowning, desperate, willing to make questionable choices if it meant surviving. "I should go," she said, even though it was barely 9. "You should stay." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning. Sophie's pulse kicked up. "Adrian, not for that. Just stay. Talk more. Fall asleep on my couch if you want. I like having you here." It was the most vulnerable thing he'd said to her, that simple admission. "I like having you here. No games, no maneuvering, just honesty." "Okay," Sophie heard herself say. "I'll stay for a while." They talked until past midnight, about everything and nothing. Adrian told her about the buildings he owned, the construction projects he funded, the legitimate empire he'd built alongside the illegitimate one. Sophie talked about her favorite patients during clinical rotations, the professor who'd taken her aside and told her she'd make an excellent surgeon, the dream of opening a clinic someday in a neighborhood like the one where she'd grown up. Somewhere around 1 a.m., Sophie's eyes started closing despite her best efforts. Adrian noticed, grabbed a blanket from somewhere, and draped it over her without comment. She should protest, should go home to her own bed. Instead, she let herself sink deeper into the expensive couch, warm and safe in a way she hadn't felt in years. "Sleep," Adrian said quietly. "I'll wake you if anything happens." Sophie wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. Her last conscious thought was that this was dangerous, this comfort, that getting used to feeling protected would make going back to her real life impossible. She fell asleep anyway, trusting him in a way that should terrify her but somehow didn't. When she woke hours later, sunlight was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. A blanket covered her that hadn't been there before. Heavier, warmer. And on the coffee table sat a note in precise handwriting. "Had to handle some business. Marcus will drive you wherever you need to go. Coffee's ready in this kitchen." Sophie sat up slowly, disoriented and stiff from sleeping on a couch. The apartment was quiet. Adrian nowhere to be seen. She found the coffee, perfect temperature, exactly how she liked it, and stood at the windows looking out at the city. Her phone showed 6 missed texts, all from Maria. "Where are you? Please tell me you're alive. I'm calling the police if you don't answer soon. Never mind. I'm assuming you're with Mystery Man. Use protection. Call me when you surface." Sophie typed back, "I'm fine. Fell asleep at a friend's place. Talk later." Friend. Was that what Adrian was? The word felt inadequate for someone who'd given her $100,000 and taught her how to break a wrist grab and made her coffee exactly right. Marcus appeared in the doorway, professional as always. "Miss Carter, Mr. Russo asked me to take you anywhere you need to go." "I need to go home, and then to campus." "Of course." The drive back to her apartment felt like reverse culture shock. From Adrian's Tribeca Palace to her walk-up with the broken refrigerator and water-stained ceiling. Sophie thanked Marcus, climbed her stairs, and stood in her studio trying to reconcile the two versions of her life. A text came through as she was changing. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," she replied honestly. "Good. Tonight's lesson is at 7 if you're free." Sophie looked at her schedule. No shifts, just studying. She should probably focus on her upcoming pathology exam. Should maintain some boundaries, some separation between this new reality and her academic responsibilities. "I'll be there," she typed instead. Because the truth was, she liked training with Adrian, liked feeling strong, capable, dangerous in her own right, liked the way he looked at her when she got something right, proud and approving, and something else she wasn't ready to name. She spent the day at the medical school library, trying to focus on disease mechanisms while her mind wandered to self-defense techniques. Maria found her around 3, slid into the opposite chair with a knowing look. "So, Mystery Man's place." Sophie didn't look up from her textbook. "It's not like that." "Then what's it like?" "It's like," Sophie struggled to explain. "He's teaching me things. How to protect myself, how to not be afraid. That's all." "Sure. Because that's what rich, powerful men do with their free time. Teach random medical students self-defense out of the goodness of their hearts." Maria's sarcasm was gentle but pointed. "Sophie, I'm not judging. I'm worried. I know, but I'm okay, I promise." "Are you? Because you've been different since that gala. More focused, sure, but also more, I don't know, intense. Like you're constantly thinking about something else." Sophie closed her textbook. Everything's changing, Maria. My whole life is different than it was 3 weeks ago. I'm still figuring out what that means. Just don't lose yourself in the process. Whatever this guy's offering, it's not worth losing who you are. The words hit harder than Maria probably intended, because Sophie wasn't entirely sure who she was anymore. The girl who'd buried her brother and vowed to become a doctor? The woman who'd accepted help from a dangerous man? Something in between? Her phone buzzed. Adrian. Something came up. Can we move tonight to tomorrow? I'm sorry. Sophie stared at the message, surprised by the disappointment that flooded through her. She'd been looking forward to training, to seeing him, to existing in that space where she felt powerful instead of powerless. No problem, she sent back. Everything okay? Will be. Richard's making noise. Need to handle it before it becomes a problem. Ice formed in Sophie's stomach. Be careful. Always. You too. She tried to focus on studying, but her mind kept circling back to what handling it meant in Adrian's world. Violence, probably. Threats, intimidation, maybe worse. The things he'd admitted to doing would do again if necessary. Sophie should be horrified, should recognize this for what it was, a glimpse into a brutal reality she had no business touching. Instead, she found herself hoping Adrian stayed safe, whatever he was doing. The realization was unsettling. When had she started caring more about his safety than her own moral boundaries? Evening came and went. Sophie forced herself through 3 chapters of pathology, made dinner, actual food, not ramen, and tried not to check her phone every 5 minutes. No new messages from Adrian, nothing from the unknown number that had threatened her, just silence, which somehow felt worse. At 10 p.m., her phone finally rang. Unknown number, local area code. Sophie almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello. Sophie Carter. The voice was male, unfamiliar, with an edge that made her skin prickle. We need to talk about your relationship with Adrian Russo. Her training from last night kicked in. She was aware suddenly of every exit in her apartment, the knife block in the kitchen, the taser Adrian had given her sitting in her nightstand drawer. Who is this? Someone who's trying to help you. Russo's dangerous. Whatever he's promised you, whatever he's given you, it comes with a price. I'm hanging up now. Wait, the voice sharpened. Richard Castellane wants to make you an offer. Better protection, better money, no strings. Just walk away from Russo. Sophie's laugh was harsh, bitter. Tell Richard I'd rather drown. She hung up, hands shaking with adrenaline. The phone rang again immediately. She blocked the number, then texted Adrian. Richard just called, tried to buy me off. The response was instant. What did you say? I told him I'd rather drown. Good girl. Stay inside. Lock the doors. I'm sending someone to watch your building. Adrian, I'm fine. Humor me, please. Sophie locked her deadbolts, grabbed the taser from her nightstand, and settled on her bed with her back against the wall. This was her life now, threatening phone calls, protective details, learning to sleep with weapons within reach. Normal medical students didn't live like this. But then, normal medical students had family money and safety nets and futures that didn't require making deals with dangerous men. Another text. I'm coming over. Don't argue. Sophie didn't argue. 20 minutes later, her building's buzzer rang. She checked through the peephole. Adrian, alone, looking like he'd come straight from whatever he'd been handling. There was tension in his shoulders, something dark in his expression. She opened the door. He stepped inside, scanned her studio apartment in one practice sweep, then focused entirely on her. You okay? Yeah, just rattled. Show me the call log. Sophie handed over her phone. Adrian studied it, his jaw tightening. Unknown number, but I can trace it. Give me an hour. It was Richard's people, we both know that. Knowing and proving are different things. Adrian looked around the apartment again, taking in the cramped space, the threadbare furniture, the cracks in the ceiling. Pack a bag. What? Pack a bag. You're staying at my place until this situation's resolved. Adrian, no, this is my home. This is a death trap. One lock I could pick in 30 seconds. Windows that don't secure. Neighbors who wouldn't hear you scream. His voice was hard, uncompromising. Richard's escalating. Phone calls today, Maybe something worse tomorrow. I can't protect you here. I don't need protection? Yes, you do. And I need you safe so I can focus on ending this instead of worrying you're vulnerable. Adrian's expression softened slightly. Please, Sophie, just until Richard backs off. She wanted to argue, to insist on independence, to prove she could handle this alone. But the truth was, she was scared. The threatening text had been abstract. The phone call had been personal. Richard knew her name, her number, probably her schedule. He was circling closer, and she had no idea how to fight back. How long was you? She asked. A week. Maybe less if Richard gets smart. Adrian moved closer, not touching, but present. You'll have your own room, your own space. I'll stay out of your way, but you'll be safe. Sophie looked around her apartment at the life she'd built from nothing and desperation. Leaving felt like surrender, but staying felt like stupidity. Okay, she said finally, but I have conditions. Name them. I still go to classes. I still work my shifts at the diner. Life continues. With security everywhere. Fine, and I'm not hiding. If Richard wants to come at me, let him see I'm not afraid. Adrian's smile was sharp and approving. You're learning. Pack. We leave in 10 minutes. Sophie threw clothes into a duffel bag, jeans, sweaters, her stethoscope, and textbooks because studying didn't stop for death threats. Adrian helped without commentary, professional, and efficient. Within 15 minutes, they were in his car, Marcus driving, heading back to Tribeca. The city passed by the windows, lights blurring together. Sophie sat close to Adrian, not touching but aware of his presence, his warmth. He'd dropped everything to come protect her, had rearranged his life, his dangerous, complicated life, to make sure she was safe. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me. This is my fault. Richard's coming at you to get to me. No, he's coming at me because I told him no, and he can't handle rejection. You're just the excuse. Sophie turned to look at Adrian. I made my choice. Whatever happens because of it, that's on me too. Adrian's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezed gently. We're in this together now. Whatever comes. Sophie squeezed back, accepting the truth she'd been avoiding since that first dinner. She wasn't just in Adrian's world anymore. She was part of it, entangled with him in ways that couldn't be undone. And the scariest part was, she didn't want to untangle. They arrived at his building, took the elevator to the 22nd floor. Adrian showed her to the guest room, bigger than her entire apartment, with an ensuite bathroom and windows overlooking the city. Make yourself comfortable, he said. Mikasa and all that. Adrian? Sophie stopped him before he could leave. What are you going to do? About Richard? His expression went cold, the warmth draining out like water from a broken glass. I'm going to make it clear that you're off limits, permanently. How? However I have to. He paused in the doorway. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we train harder. If Richard's escalating, you need to be ready. He left before she could respond. Sophie stood in the guest room, surrounded by luxury she still wasn't used to, and wondered what "however I have to" meant in Adrian Russo's world. Outside the windows, the city glittered, indifferent and beautiful. Somewhere out there, Richard Castellane was planning his next move. And here, in a Tribeca apartment that cost more than most people made in a year, Sophie Carter was learning to be dangerous. She fell asleep with the taser under her pillow and Adrian's voice in her head. You're stronger than you think. Tomorrow, she'd prove it. The nightmare came at 3 a.m. Daniel's face, pale and wasting, his hand reaching for hers across a hospital bed she couldn't afford. Sophie woke gasping, disoriented in the unfamiliar room, tangled in sheets that cost more than her monthly rent. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was, why everything smelled like expensive detergent and clean money. Then reality crashed back. Adrian's apartment, Richard's threats, her new life that felt increasingly like someone else's. Light spilled from under her door, a thin golden line in the darkness. Sophie grabbed the robe Adrian had left folded on the chair, wrapped herself in it, and padded barefoot into the hallway. The living room lights were dim, but she could see Adrian at the dining table, laptop open, phone pressed to his ear. I don't care what it costs, he was saying, voice low and dangerous. I want every business Castellane owns examined, taxes, permits, health codes, everything. If he's jaywalked in the past decade, I want documentation. He noticed Sophie held up one finger. She should go back to bed, give him privacy. Instead, she moved to the kitchen, found the coffee maker, started a pot. By the time it finished brewing, Adrian had ended his call. Bad dream? He asked. Is it that obvious? You look like you've seen a ghost. Adrian closed his laptop. Want to talk about it? Sophie poured 2 mugs, carried them to the table, and sat across from him. Just Daniel, the usual guilt spiral. Survivor's guilt. Psychiatrist now? Experienced patient. Adrian wrapped his hands around the coffee mug. After my mother died, I dreamed about her every night for 6 months, always the same. Her asking why I didn't save her, why I let her suffer. What made it stop? Accepting that I couldn't have saved her, that the system killed her, not me. That guilt was just pain with nowhere else to go. He took a sip of coffee. Doesn't make the dreams go away entirely, just makes them less frequent. Sophie understood that. The way grief morphed into guilt, how both became background noise you learn to live with. What are you doing up? Working. Richard's people made 3 more calls tonight. To your old landlord, your work supervisor at the Mercury, someone at your medical school, administrative office. Ice formed in Sophie's chest. What did they want? Information, your schedule, your habits, your vulnerabilities. Adrian's jaw tightened. They're building a profile, which means Richard's planning something more than phone calls. So what do we do? We make him very sorry he started this. Adrian turned his laptop around, showed her a screen full of documents. Richard Castellane owns 17 businesses in Manhattan. 12 have significant code violations I can report anonymously. 3 have tax irregularities that'll trigger audits. 2 are operating without proper licensing. Sophie scanned the information, impressed despite herself. How did you get all this? I have people who specialize in finding things others want hidden. By Monday morning, Richard's going to be drowning in city inspectors and IRS agents. Adrian's smile was cold. Won't hurt him permanently, but it'll occupy his attention somewhere other than you. That's not fighting. That's warfare. No, warfare comes if he touches you. This is just a warning shot. The casual way Adrian discussed destruction should disturb her. Instead, Sophie felt something else. A dark satisfaction that someone was finally fighting back against people like Richard, men who used power to crush anyone weaker. Teach me how to do that, she said. Adrian's eyebrows rose. Do what? Find vulnerabilities. Use systems against people who think they're untouchable. Sophie leaned forward. You said you'd teach me to not be afraid. This is part of that, isn't it? Knowing how to fight without throwing punches. It's dangerous knowledge. Everything about you is dangerous. Hasn't stopped me yet. Adrian studied her with that unreadable expression, like he was solving an equation only he could see. Finally, he nodded. Okay, but not tonight. Tonight you sleep because you have pathology at 9 and you're already running on fumes. I'm fine. You're exhausted. I can see it. He stood, moved around the table, and gently turned her chair. Bed. Now. That's not a request. Sophie should bristle at being ordered around. Instead, the command felt like care, someone noticing she was tired, forcing her to rest when she wouldn't do it herself. She let him guide her back to the guest room, let him tuck the blanket around her shoulders like she was something precious. Adrian? She said as he turned to leave. Yeah? Thank you for caring whether I sleep. His smile was soft, genuine. Someone has to. You sure as hell don't. He left, pulling the door almost closed. Sophie lay in the darkness, listening to the distant sounds of him working, keyboard clicks, low phone conversations, the rhythm of someone who'd learned to function without rest. She should be scared, should recognize how deep she'd gotten into something she didn't fully understand. Instead, she felt safe, protected. Like for the first time since Daniel died, someone had her back. She fell asleep easier this time, no nightmares waiting. Morning arrived with weak sunlight and the smell of bacon. Sophie emerged from the guest room to find Adrian at the stove, cooking breakfast with the same precision he applied to everything else. He'd showered, changed into fresh clothes, looked infuriatingly alert for someone who'd been up until at least 4. You cook now? Sophie asked, sliding onto a bar stool. I cook when feeding someone matters. He plated eggs and bacon, set it in front of her. Eat. You missed dinner last night. I had crackers. Crackers aren't dinner. Adrian poured orange juice, placed it beside her plate. You need actual nutrition if we're training tonight. Sophie ate, surprised by how hungry she was. The food was simple but perfect. Eggs cooked exactly right, bacon crispy, toast with real butter. Adrian made his own plate and sat beside her, close enough their shoulders almost touched. Marcus will drive you to campus, he said between bites. He'll stay in the parking lot, not obvious but present. If anything feels off, you call me immediately. I feel like I'm in witness protection. You're in crime boss protection. More effective, fewer rules. Adrian's tone was light, but his eyes were serious. I know this is suffocating. It won't be forever. How long is forever? However long it takes to make Richard understand you're not a viable target. He paused. There's a gala Saturday night. Charity thing, very public. Lots of society people. I need to go, and I want you with me. Sophie set down her fork. Why? Because Richard will be there, and I want him to see us together, see that his threats haven't worked, see that you're not hiding. Adrian met her eyes. I know it's asking a lot, public performance, playing a role, but it sends a message. What message? That you're mine, and I protect what's mine. There was that word again, landing differently each time he used it. Not possessive exactly, but claiming, stating fact. What if I don't want to be yours? Sophie asked quietly. Adrian was still for a moment. Then you tell me that, and we find another way to handle Richard. But Sophie, he turned to face her fully. I think you do. Want to be mine, just like I'm starting to be yours, whether I planned on it or not. The honesty was devastating. Sophie had expected manipulation, games, the usual bullshit men pulled when they wanted something, not this raw admission that he was in as deep as she was. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Any of this. The money, the protection, the whatever we are to each other. Neither do I, but we're figuring it out together. Adrian's hand found hers on the counter. Saturday, the gala. Will you come? Sophie should say no, should maintain boundaries, remember that this was supposed to be transactional. But she was tired of should, tired of boundaries that felt more like cages. What do I wear? Adrian's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. Leave that to me. Just say yes. Yes, Sophie said, and felt the last of her resistance crumble. The week blurred into routine that felt anything but normal. Sophie attended classes with Marcus shadowing from a distance. She studied in Adrian's apartment instead of the library, spreading textbooks across his dining table while he worked on his laptop nearby. They trained every evening, hand-to-hand combat, weapons handling, threat assessment. Adrian pushed her hard, never accepting less than her best, and Sophie found herself getting stronger, faster, more confident. Thursday night, he taught her to shoot. The building had a basement range Sophie hadn't known existed. Adrian handed her a Glock 19, showed her how to load it, how to aim, how to breathe through the recoil. Don't close your eyes when you pull the trigger, he said, standing behind her, hands guiding her stance. Keep both eyes open. Focus on the front sight. Sophie fired, the sound deafening even with ear protection. The target showed a hole 3 inches left of center. Better, Adrian said. Again. They practiced until her arms ached and her ears rang. By the end, Sophie was hitting center mass consistently. Adrian looked proud, which felt better than any grade she'd ever received. You're a natural, he observed, clearing the weapon. Or I'm highly motivated not to be helpless. Both can be true. He stored the gun in its case. How do you feel? Sophie considered it honestly. Powerful. Dangerous. Like maybe I could actually protect myself if I had to. Good. That's the goal. Adrian locked the gun cabinet. But remember, knowing how to use a weapon doesn't mean you should. Always look for alternatives first. Even you? Especially me. Violence is expensive, messy, and hard to take back. I use it when necessary, not casually. They rode the elevator back to the apartment in comfortable silence. Sophie was getting used to this. The rhythm of training, debriefing, existing in Adrian's space like she belonged there. It should feel strange. Instead, it felt inevitable. Friday morning, a dress box appeared in her room. Inside was something midnight blue and elegant, similar in style to the first dress, but more formal. A note was tucked in the tissue paper. For tomorrow night, you'll be the most beautiful woman there. Sophie tried it on, stood in front of the mirror, and barely recognized herself. The dress fit perfectly, hugging curves she usually hid under scrubs and oversized sweaters. She looked sophisticated, dangerous, like someone who belonged at Adrian Russo's side. The thought should scare her. It didn't. Saturday arrived with nervous energy Sophie couldn't shake. She spent the day studying, trying to focus on renal physiology, while her mind wandered to the gala, to Richard, to what tonight would mean. Adrian was gone most of the day, handling business he didn't explain. Marcus stayed outside her door, a silent presence she'd grown accustomed to. At 5 p.m., Adrian returned, looking tense. "Everything okay?" Sophie asked from the couch where she'd been pretending to read. "Will be." He loosened his tie, poured himself whiskey. "Richard knows we're coming tonight. His people have been asking questions, making calls. He's planning something. Should we not go?" "No, we absolutely go. Whatever he's planning, better it happens in public where he's limited." Adrian downed the whiskey. "But stay close to me tonight. Don't wander off. Don't trust anyone who approaches you alone." "You're scaring me." "Good. Scared means alert. Alert means alive." He set down the glass. "Go get ready. We leave at 7. Sophie showered, did her makeup carefully, slipped into the blue dress. She'd never been particularly vain, but tonight she wanted to look perfect. Wanted to walk into that gala on Adrian's arm and make Richard Castellane regret ever targeting her. When she emerged from the guest room, Adrian was waiting in the living room wearing a tuxedo that looked custom-made. He turned as she entered, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. "You're—" He stopped, searching for words. "Sophie, you're stunning. You clean up pretty well yourself." "This old thing?" Adrian gestured to his tuxedo, self-deprecating. Then his expression turned serious. "Last chance to back out. We walk in there together, it's a statement. Richard will see it as a declaration of war. Then let's go to war." Sophie moved closer, straightened his bow tie even though it didn't need it. "I'm tired of hiding." Adrian's hand came up, cupped her cheek. For a moment, Sophie thought he might kiss her, wanted him to kiss her. Instead, he just looked at her like she was something rare and worth protecting. "Let's show them what a mistake they made," he said quietly. The car ride to the venue was silent, tension thick enough to cut. Sophie's awareness was heightened, every shadow feeling like a threat. Adrian must have sensed it because his hand found hers, squeezed gently. "Breathe," he murmured. "You've got this." "What if I don't?" "Then I do. We're in this together, remember?" The gala was at the plaza. Of course it was, because rich people had limited imagination. Sophie had never been inside, had walked past it 1,000 times without imagining she'd ever enter. Now she was stepping out of a town car, Adrian's hand on her lower back, cameras flashing as they climbed the steps. "Who are they?" someone called out. "Adrian Russo and guest," another voice answered. "Russo Development, Real Estate." The lobby was crystal and marble, overwhelming in its opulence. Adrian guided her through the crowd with practiced ease, nodding to people, making small talk, his hand never leaving her back. Sophie smiled and played the part, feeling like an actress in someone else's life. Then she saw him. Richard Castellane stood near the bar, watching them with cold calculation. He was older than she remembered, 50s maybe, with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. When he caught Sophie looking, he raised his glass in a mock toast. "Don't react," Adrian said quietly. "Let him come to us." They didn't have to wait long. Richard approached during cocktail hour, 2 men flanking him like guards. "Russo," he said, voice dripping false warmth. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Richard, always a pleasure." Adrian's tone matched his, polite, empty. "You remember Sophie?" Richard's eyes traveled over her, assessing and dismissive. "The server upgraded your wardrobe, I see." "Sophie Carter?" she said, extending her hand with more confidence than she felt. Medical student, actually. Serving was just a side job. Richard took her hand, held it a moment too long. Of course. My apologies for the confusion. No confusion, Adrian said, voice dropping to something dangerous. Sophie's exactly who I said she was at Maria. Mine. Interesting claim, considering how recently you met. Richard released Sophie's hand. Makes one wonder about the nature of your relationship. Wonder all you want. Won't change reality. Adrian's smile was sharp. How's business, Richard? Heard you've been having some permit issues. Richard's expression flickered, annoyance breaking through the polished surface. Minor complications. Nothing I can't handle. I'm sure city inspectors can be so thorough when they want to be. The threat hung between them, unspoken but clear. Richard's jaw tightened. Careful, Russo. You're playing games you might not win. I don't play games. I end them. Adrian's hand tightened on Sophie's back. If you'll excuse us, I promised Sophie a drink. They walked away, leaving Richard standing there. Sophie could feel his eyes on her back, cold and calculating. She wanted to look over her shoulder, to confirm the threat. Training kicked in instead. Keep moving. Maintain awareness. Don't show fear. Adrian led her to a quieter corner, handed her champagne she didn't want. That went well, she said, voice shaking slightly. He's rattled. The inspections are costing him money and reputation. He wanted to intimidate us, assert dominance. Adrian scanned the room, always watching. Instead, he looked weak. He doesn't feel weak. Because you're smart enough to recognize danger, but everyone else saw a man thrown off balance by minor bureaucratic annoyance. Adrian's eyes found hers. You did perfectly, by the way. Confident, poised, exactly what we needed. Sophie wanted to feel pride, but mostly felt exhausted. The performance was draining, pretending to be comfortable in a world where she fundamentally didn't belong. Adrian must have sensed it because he leaned closer. We can leave whenever you want, he said quietly. Say the word. No. We stay. We finish this. They circulated through the gala, Adrian introducing her to people whose names Sophie immediately forgot. Everyone was polite, curious about the woman on Adrian Russo's arm. Some looked at her with pity, like she was a lamb walking into slaughter. Others with envy, like she'd won some prize they'd wanted. None of them knew the truth, that she was here by choice, that Adrian had given her power instead of taking it, that she was learning to be dangerous in her own right. Dinner was served at 8, multiple courses Sophie picked at while making small talk with a venture capitalist's wife, who thought medical school was quaint. Adrian navigated the conversation smoothly, his hand finding Sophie's under the table, grounding her. Then, between the main course and dessert, everything went wrong. Sophie excused herself to the restroom, needing a moment away from the suffocating crowd. Adrian started to follow, but she waved him off. I can pee by myself. Take your phone. If you're not back in 5 minutes, I'm coming after you. The restroom was blessedly empty, all marble and gold fixtures. Sophie locked herself in a stall, took deep breaths, tried to remember why she'd agreed to this. The gala, the performance, the constant threat assessment. It was too much. She was washing her hands when the door opened and a woman walked in. Tall, blonde, expensively dressed, vaguely familiar from the cocktail hour. You're Sophie, the woman said. Not a question. Do I know you? Rebecca Morse. I used to date Adrian years ago. Rebecca's smile was thin, before he became whatever he is now. Sophie remembered then, the ex-fiancé Adrian had mentioned, the one who'd married a lawyer and moved to Connecticut, except she was here, at a Manhattan gala, looking at Sophie like she was a problem to solve. That was a long time ago, Sophie said carefully. 6 years. Long enough that I thought I was past caring what he did. Rebecca moved closer, invading personal space. But seeing him with you, it's like watching a car crash. You have no idea what you've gotten into. I know exactly what I've gotten into. Do you? Do you know how many people Adrian's hurt? How many lives he's destroyed building his empire? Rebecca's voice was urgent now, almost pleading.
You seem like a nice girl, smart. Get out before you become another casualty. Sophie's training kicked in. Assess the threat, identify the motivation, respond appropriately. Rebecca wasn't dangerous, just desperate. Probably still in love with Adrian, unable to move on. Thank you for your concern, Sophie said, moving toward the door. But I'm fine. Rebecca grabbed her arm. You're not fine. Richard Castellane is circling, and Adrian's using you as bait. When this ends badly, and it will, you'll be the one who pays. Let go of my arm. Listen to me. Sophie used the wrist break Adrian had taught her, twisting sharply and stepping back. Rebecca stumbled, surprised. They stared at each other, tension crackling. I said, let go. Sophie's voice was steady, cold. I appreciate that you're worried, but I make my own choices. Adrian isn't using me. If anything, I'm using him, his money, his protection, his resources. So save your intervention for someone who needs it. She left before Rebecca could respond, heart hammering. The hallway felt too narrow, too exposed. Sophie wanted Adrian, wanted the safety of his presence. She was halfway back to the ballroom when someone stepped out of a side corridor blocking her path. Richard Castellane, alone, smiling like a shark. Sophie, perfect timing. I was hoping we could talk privately. Every instinct screamed danger. Sophie's hand went to her clutch, where she'd tucked the small canister of pepper spray Adrian had insisted she carry. There's nothing to discuss. I think there is. See, Adrian's made you a target. Whatever he's promised, whatever you think this relationship is, it's a death sentence. Richard stepped closer. But I can offer something better. Protection, money, a future that doesn't involve looking over your shoulder. I already turned down your offer. On the phone, remember? That was before you understood how serious this situation is. Adrian's playing with fire and you're going to get burned. Richard's smile widened. Unless you're smart enough to switch sides. Sophie laughed, sharp and bitter. Switch sides? This isn't a game, and I'm not a prize. I chose Adrian because he's honest about what he is. You're just a predator in expensive clothes. Richard's expression darkened. Careful, girl. You're making enemies you can't afford. Funny. Adrian said the same thing about you. She tried to move past him, but Richard's hand shot out, gripping her upper arm. Not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to stop her. Sophie's training took over. She was reaching for the pepper spray when a voice cut through the tension. Let her go! Adrian stood at the end of the hallway, perfectly still, but something in his posture radiated violence. Behind him were two men Sophie recognized from his apartment building, security, muscle, whatever they were officially. Richard released her immediately. We were just talking. No, you were touching what's mine after being warned not to. Adrian moved closer, each step deliberate. That's a problem, Richard. This is a public event. You going to cause a scene? If necessary. Adrian was beside Sophie now, positioning himself between her and Richard. But I'd prefer to keep this civilized. Walk away. Pretend this didn't happen, and never touch her again. Richard's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. You think you can threaten me? I own half this city, and I own the other half. The half you need to operate. The half that can make your life very difficult. Adrian's voice dropped to something lethal. Walk away, Richard. Last chance. For a moment, Sophie thought Richard might escalate, might push back and turn this into the confrontation everyone expected. Then something in Adrian's eyes must have convinced him because he stepped back, straightened his jacket, and forced a smile. This isn't over, Russo. Yes, Adrian said quietly. It is. You just don't know it yet. Richard left, disappearing into the ballroom. Adrian turned to Sophie immediately, hands gentle as he checked her arm where Richard had grabbed her. Did he hurt you? No, I'm fine. You're shaking. Sophie looked down at her hands, surprised to find he was right. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving her trembling and exhausted. I was handling it. I know you were. Saw you reach for the spray. Adrian's smile was proud, but his eyes were furious. But you shouldn't have had to. This is my fault. I should have stayed with you. I'm not a child. I can go to the bathroom alone. Not anymore, not until Richard's handled. Adrian guided her toward the exit, away from the gala. We're leaving. But, now, Sophie, This stopped being worth it the moment he touched you. They left through a service exit, avoiding the crowd. The car was waiting, Marcus behind the wheel looking grim. Adrian helped Sophie inside, then slid in beside her. The door closed, sealing them in leather-scented silence. "I'm sorry," Adrian said after a moment. "I miscalculated. Thought Richard would be smarter than to confront you directly. He's desperate. The inspections are working." "Not fast enough." Adrian pulled out his phone, typed something. "Tomorrow morning, Richard's going to wake up to a very different reality." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done from the start. End this permanently." He put the phone away, looked at her with something raw and honest in his expression. "I won't let him hurt you, Sophie, whatever it costs." Sophie should be scared of what that meant, should recognize the violence implicit in his promise. Instead, she felt safe, protected, like Adrian would actually burn the world down before letting Richard touch her again. "I met your ex," she said, changing the subject. "Rebecca. In the bathroom." Adrian's expression flickered. "What did she say?" "That I should run, that you're dangerous and this will end badly, and I'm in over my head." "She's probably right." "I don't care." Sophie turned to face him fully. "I'm not Rebecca. I'm not looking for normal or safe or a husband who comes home at 5. I'm looking for—" She stopped, not sure how to finish. "For what?" Adrian's voice was soft. "For someone who sees me, who doesn't want to fix me or save me or make me smaller to fit their life. Someone who—" Sophie's courage almost failed. "Someone like you." Adrian's hand came up, cupped her face with devastating gentleness. "Sophie, I'm falling for you," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I know that's stupid and probably a terrible idea, but I'm tired of pretending I'm not. You've given me money and protection and taught me how to fight, but more than that, you've made me feel powerful. Seen. Like I matter. You do matter, more than you know. Then kiss me. Stop being careful and distant and just kiss me." Adrian hesitated, searching her face. "If I do this, there's no going back. You understand that? I'm counting on it." He kissed her then, finally, pulling her close with one hand tangled in her hair and the other at her waist. The kiss was everything Sophie had imagined and nothing like it, desperate and gentle, claiming and questioning, a conversation without words. She melted into him, into this moment that felt inevitable, like everything had been building to exactly this. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling too," he admitted. "Have been since you looked at me in that hallway at the Rothmore and didn't run. You scare the hell out of me, Sophie Carter." "Good. You should be scared. I'm dangerous now, remember? You taught me." Adrian laughed, the sound rough and genuine. "I created a monster." "No, you created an equal." They rode the rest of the way to his apartment in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, the city lights blurring past the windows. Sophie felt the shift, the fundamental change in their relationship. This wasn't performance anymore. This was real, messy and complicated and probably doomed, but real. Back at the apartment, Adrian poured them both whiskey despite Sophie's usual reluctance to drink. They sat on the couch, shoes off, the formality of the gala falling away. "What happens tomorrow?" Sophie asked. "With Richard. I make it clear that continuing this war costs him everything he's built. His businesses, his reputation, his freedom, if necessary." Adrian's voice was matter-of-fact. "He'll have a choice. Back off permanently or lose everything. And if he chooses wrong, then I make good on the threat." Adrian looked at her. "Does that scare you, knowing what I'm capable of?" Sophie thought about it honestly. "It should, but mostly I'm just relieved someone's finally fighting back against people like him." "That's a dangerous perspective. I'm a dangerous woman now. You made sure of that." Adrian's smile was slight but genuine. "We're quite a pair." "Yeah, we are." They talked until late, about everything and nothing. Adrian told her about his childhood in Brooklyn, the father who'd died in prison when he was 12, the mother who'd worked herself to death trying to keep them afloat. Sophie talked about Daniel,
about the unfairness of watching someone you love die slowly while the system shrugged. They traded scars and stories, building intimacy from shared pain. Around 2 a.m., Sophie's eyes started closing despite her best efforts. Adrian noticed, stood, and pulled her to her feet. "Bed," he said. "Yours or mine?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility. Adrian's expression was conflicted, wanting warring with caution. "Yours," he said finally. "When we cross that line, and we will, I want you fully conscious and sure, not exhausted from a night of adrenaline and confrontation." Sophie should be disappointed. Instead, she felt respected, seen. "You're too good to me." "No, I'm exactly as good as you deserve." Adrian walked her to the guest room, kissed her forehead gently. "Sleep. Tomorrow we handle Richard, and then we figure out what we are." "Yeah, that." Sophie slept deep and dreamless, waking to sunlight and the smell of coffee. She found Adrian in the kitchen, looking like he'd been awake for hours, phone pressed to his ear. "Understood. Make it happen." He ended the call, noticed Sophie. "Morning? Coffee's ready?" "What's happening?" "Richard Castellane is about to have a very bad day." Adrian poured her coffee, added cream exactly how she liked it. 3 of his major properties just failed safety inspections. His liquor licenses are under review, and his largest investor just pulled funding based on concerns about his business practices. Sophie's eyes widened. "You did all that overnight?" "I made calls. Other people did the actual work." Adrian's expression was hard, satisfied. By end of business Monday, Richard's going to be fighting to keep his empire from collapsing. He won't have time or resources to worry about you. "That's," Sophie struggled for words, "brutal." "That's protection. He threatened what's mine. There are consequences." The possessiveness should bother her. It didn't. Sophie moved into Adrian's space, wrapped her arms around him, felt him relax into the embrace. "Thank you," she said against his chest. "For what?" "For fighting for me. For seeing me as worth protecting." Sophie pulled back to look at him. "No one's done that since Daniel died." Adrian's hand came up, tucked hair behind her ear. "Get used to it. I'm not going anywhere." They stood in the kitchen, sunlight streaming through the windows, and Sophie felt something settle in her chest. This was her life now, dangerous and complicated, full of threats and protection, balanced between medical school and a crime boss's empire. It wasn't what she'd planned. It was better. Because for the first time in years, Sophie Carter wasn't just surviving. She was living. The call came Tuesday morning while Sophie was elbow-deep in a cadaver dissection, trying to identify the branches of the brachial plexus. Her phone buzzed against her thigh. Adrian's ringtone, the one she'd set so she'd always know when it was him. "I need to take this," she told her lab partner, stripping off her gloves. Outside in the hallway, she answered, "What's wrong?" "Richard's making a move today, probably within the next few hours." Adrian's voice was clipped, controlled. "Marcus is outside. Get in the car. Go straight to my place. Don't stop for anything." Sophie's heart kicked into overdrive. What kind of move? The desperate kind. He's cornered, losing everything, and cornered animals are unpredictable. A pause. "Please, Sophie, just do what I'm asking." She wanted to argue, to insist she could handle herself, to prove the training had made her capable. But the urgency in Adrian's voice stopped her. "Okay, I'm coming." "Good. I'll meet you there in an hour." Sophie grabbed her bag, told the professor she was feeling sick, and walked out of the medical school trying to look calm. Marcus was waiting at the curb, tension in every line of his body. "Miss Carter," he said, opening the door. The drive to Tribeca felt endless. Sophie watched the streets blur past, her mind cataloging exits and threats the way Adrian had taught her. Every car felt suspicious, every pedestrian a potential danger. By the time they pulled into Adrian's building, her hands were shaking. The apartment felt like a fortress. 22 floors up, secure elevator, walls of glass showing the entire city spread below. Sophie paced the living room, too wired to sit, checking her phone every 30 seconds. Adrian arrived 20 minutes later with 3 men she'd never seen before. They looked like Marcus. Professional, dangerous, the kind of people who solved problems with violence when necessary. Sophie. Adrian crossed to her immediately, hands on her shoulders. You're safe. That's what matters. What's happening? Richard hired someone, a professional, not one of his usual people. Adrian's jaw was tight. We intercepted communications this morning. He's planning to grab you, use you as leverage to force me to back off. The words landed like physical blows. Grab you. Leverage. This had escalated beyond threats, beyond business warfare. This was personal, dangerous, the kind of situation people didn't walk away from. When? Sophie managed. We don't know. Soon. Which is why you're staying here with security until we locate him. Him? The professional Richard hired. Goes by Kostya, former Russian military, specializes in extractions. Adrian's expression was granite. He's good, which makes him dangerous. But we're better. Sophie should be terrified. Her pulse hammered, her mouth tasted like copper. But underneath the fear was anger. Rage at Richard for escalating, at the situation for spiraling, at the unfairness of being targeted just for existing in Adrian's orbit. I'm not hiding, she said. Yes, you are. This isn't negotiable. Neither am I. Sophie pulled away from his hands. You taught me to fight, Adrian. Taught me awareness and defense and how to be dangerous. You don't get to bench me now because things got real. This is different. How? How is this different from everything else you've been preparing me for? She was yelling now, fear transmuting into fury. You said knowledge removes fear. You said I'm stronger than I think, so let me prove it. Adrian looked like he wanted to argue, to lock her in the apartment and handle this himself. Then something in his expression shifted. Recognition, maybe, or respect. What are you suggesting? Use me as bait. Let Richard think his plan's working. Sophie's mind was racing, connecting dots. This Kostya, he's watching, right? Waiting for an opportunity. So give him one. Let me go about my normal routine, make myself visible, draw him out where you can control the situation. Absolutely not. Why? Because it's dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. At least this way we end it on our terms. One of Adrian's men, tall, scarred, dangerous looking, spoke up. She's not wrong. We've been trying to locate Kostya for 6 hours with no success. He's a ghost, but if we dangle the target, he'll come to us. Victor, Adrian's tone was warning. I'm just saying, boss, the girl's got a point, and we can set up a controlled environment, multiple layers of security. She'd never actually be at risk. Adrian looked between Victor and Sophie, conflict written across his face. If anything goes wrong, it won't, Sophie interrupted. Because you'll make sure of it. You've been protecting me this whole time. Trust yourself. The argument stretched another 20 minutes, Adrian listing every possible way the plan could fail, Sophie countering each one. Finally, he relented. Not because she'd convinced him, but because they both knew she was right. Waiting for Kostya to strike on his terms was more dangerous than controlling the engagement. We do this my way, Adrian said finally. Every detail, every precaution. You follow orders exactly. Agreed. And after we handle this, you're taking a week off from everything. No school, no work, just rest. Sophie wanted to argue, but saw the fear beneath his control. Okay? They spent the next 2 hours planning. The trap would be simple. Sophie would leave the apartment for her usual evening shift at the Mercury Diner, visible and apparently alone. Kostya would make his move either en route or at the diner. Adrian's team would be positioned throughout, ready to intercept. He'll likely try to grab you between the car and the entrance, Victor explained, pointing to a map of the area. Quick extraction, van waiting, in and out in under 30 seconds. So we position people here, here, and here. Adrian marked spots on the map. Sophie wears a tracker and audio feed. First sign of contact, we move. Sophie listened to them plan her abduction with surreal detachment. This was her life now, coordinating with dangerous men to trap another dangerous man, using herself as bait like it was normal. Part of her wondered when she'd become this person, when medical school had taken a back seat to tactical planning. Then she remembered Richard's hand on her arm, his threatening smile. the way he'd looked at her like she was property. She remembered every man who'd ever made her feel small, helpless, like her only value was what they could take. No, this was who she'd always been, someone who fought back. Adrian had just given her the tools. At 6 p.m., Sophie changed into her diner uniform, tucked the tracker into her shoe, and the audio feed into her bra. Adrian checked the equipment twice, his hands shaking slightly. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "Yeah, I do. For me, not just for you." "Why?" Sophie met his eyes. "Because I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of men like Richard thinking they can use me as leverage. This ends tonight, and I'm ending it." Adrian kissed her then, hard and desperate, like he was trying to memorize the feel of her. "If anything happens to you, it won't. You've got me, remember?" The drive to the diner was choreographed precision. Marcus at the wheel, 2 additional cars running parallel routes. Adrian in an SUV, a block behind monitoring everything. Sophie sat in the back seat, breathing through her fear, running through the training in her head. Stay aware, read the environment, trust your instincts, fight dirty if necessary. They pulled up outside the Mercury at exactly 6:47. Sophie could see Diane through the window, setting tables for the dinner rush. Normal life, continuing oblivious while she walked into a trap. "Ready?" Marcus asked. Sophie checked her reflection in the window, pale but determined. "Ready." She stepped out of the car and everything slowed down. Her awareness expanded, taking in every detail. The white van parked 3 cars down, engine running. The man in a jacket too heavy for the weather standing near the corner. The way the street was oddly empty for a Tuesday evening. Sophie walked toward the diner entrance, every sense screaming danger. 5 steps. 4. 3. The man in the heavy jacket moved. Sophie's training took over. She didn't run or scream, those would be expected. Instead, she kept walking, let him think she hadn't noticed, waited until he was close enough. Then she spun, pepper spray already in hand, and hit him full as a face. He stumbled back, cursing in Russian. The van doors flew open and 2 more men jumped out. Sophie ran, not toward the diner where civilians could get hurt, but toward the alley Adrian had designated as the secondary intercept point. She made it 3 steps before someone grabbed her from behind, arm around her waist, lifting her off the ground. Sophie went limp for a second, let her attacker think she'd frozen in fear. Then she drove her elbow back hard into his ribs, exactly like Adrian had taught her. The grip loosened. Sophie twisted, broke free, stumbled forward into the alley, and ran straight into Adrian. He steadied her with one hand, his other holding a gun pointed past her at the men who'd been chasing. Behind him, Victor and the rest of his team had materialized from nowhere, weapons drawn, blocking all exits. "Kostya," Adrian called out. "Show yourself, this is over." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a 4th man emerged from the van, older, graying, with the bearing of someone who'd seen combat. He assessed the situation with cold efficiency, saw he was outgunned and outmaneuvered, and smiled. "Russo," he said with a thick accent. "Should have known you'd turn the girl into a trap. Should have known better than to take Richard's contract." Adrian's voice was ice. "Walk away. Tell your employer the job's failed. Don't come back to New York. And if I refuse, then you don't walk anywhere." Adrian's gun stayed level, unwavering. "Your choice." Kostya looked at Sophie, at Adrian, at the armed men surrounding him. Whatever calculation he ran, it ended with self-preservation. He raised his hand slowly, backing toward the van. "Tell Castellane he's on his own," Kostya said. "Not worth dying over." He got in the van. His men followed, nursing injuries but alive. The van pulled away, disappearing into traffic. Adrian's team didn't lower their weapons until it was completely gone. Then Adrian turned to Sophie, and the controlled violence in his expression melted into something raw and terrified. "You were supposed to wait for us to intercept. I handled it. You could have been hurt, but I wasn't." Sophie grabbed his jacket, pulling him close. "I did exactly what you taught me. Saw the threat, reacted appropriately, used the training. It worked, Adrian. We won." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Don't ever scare me like that again." "Can't promise that. Seems like scared is our normal now." Adrian laughed, the sound shaky with relief. Fair point. They stood in the alley while his team secured the scene, calling in favors to make sure no official reports were filed. Marcus appeared with the car, and they rode back to Tribeca in silence. Sophie tucked against Adrian's side, his arm around her shoulders like he couldn't bear to let go. Richard's next, Adrian said quietly. Tonight. This ends completely. Sophie nodded, too exhausted to argue. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her shaky and cold. Adrian must have felt it because he pulled her closer. You were incredible, he said. Terrifying and incredible. Good terrifying or bad terrifying? The kind that makes me understand exactly how dangerous you've become. Adrian pressed a kiss to her temple. My equal. Like you said. Back at the apartment, Adrian made calls while Sophie showered, washing away the smell of fear and pepper spray. She dressed in borrowed clothes, Adrian's NYU shirt and sweatpants, and found him in his office, phone pressed to his ear, voice hard. I don't care what it costs. I want Richard Castellane's entire operation dismantled by morning. Every business, every asset, everything. A pause. No, not destroyed, transferred, to legitimate owners who'll actually follow the law. He hung up, saw Sophie in the doorway. It's done. By tomorrow, Richard won't have anything left except debt and federal investigations. What happens to him? That depends on how smart he is. He can disappear, start over somewhere else under a new name, or he can fight, and I'll make sure he loses everything, including his freedom. Adrian's expression was grim. Either way, he's not a threat to you anymore. Sophie should feel victorious. Instead, she just felt tired. All this because he couldn't handle being told no. All this because powerful men think they're entitled to whatever they want. Adrian stood, moved toward her. But you showed him differently. Showed everyone watching that you're not someone to underestimate. I couldn't have done it without you. You could have, would have, eventually. I just gave you the tools faster. He pulled her close, swaying slightly like they were dancing to music only he could hear. What happens now, Sophie Carter? You've got your tuition paid, your safety secured, your enemy defeated. What's next? Sophie thought about it. Medical school, residency, the clinic she wanted to open someday, the life she'd planned before Adrian Russo walked into it and changed everything. I finished school, she said. Become a doctor. Help people. And us? Us. Sophie looked up at him, at this dangerous man who'd given her safety and strength and something terrifyingly close to love. We figure it out as we go. Together. Together, Adrian repeated like he was testing the word. I've never been good at together. Neither have I. But I'm willing to learn if you are. He kissed her answer, soft and slow and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I have to go handle Richard. Make sure the transfer of assets goes smoothly, that he understands the consequences of fighting back. Adrian's voice was reluctant. I don't want to leave you. Then don't. Not forever, just for tonight. Sophie stepped back, giving him space. Do what you need to do. I'll be here when you get back. You're sure? I'm sure. Just be careful and come back to me. Adrian smiled, something soft and genuine that transformed his whole face. Always. He left with Victor and his team, and Sophie was alone in the apartment for the first time since moving in. She should study. The pathology exam was Friday, and she'd barely looked at the material. Instead, she found herself in Adrian's office, looking at the books he was restoring. The Jane Eyre was nearly finished, its spine repaired, pages carefully preserved. Sophie ran her fingers over the leather cover, thinking about patience and care, about taking broken things and making them whole. Was that what Adrian had done with her, or what they'd done for each other? Her phone buzzed. Maria, texting for the 100th time. Are you alive? I'm seriously worried. Sophie typed back. I'm alive. I'm good. Actually, really good. Coffee tomorrow? I owe you a long explanation. You owe me several explanations. And details about Mystery Man. Noon at the usual place? See you there. Sophie made tea, curled up on the couch with her pathology textbook, and tried to focus on kidney disease. The words blurred together, her mind wandering to everything that had happened. 3 weeks ago, she'd been drowning, in debt, exhaustion, desperation. Now she was, what? Saved? Changed? Something in between? She thought about the girl who'd served champagne at the Rothmore, invisible and alone. About the woman who'd stood in an alley tonight, fought off an attacker, walked into danger because sitting still felt worse. They were the same person, but also completely different. Sophie must have fallen asleep because she woke to Adrian gently lifting the textbook from her lap, his face tired but satisfied. "It's done," he said quietly. Richard signed over everything. He's leaving the city tomorrow, relocating to Florida under an assumed identity. If he ever comes back, the federal charges we've been holding will be filed immediately. So it's over. It's over. Adrian sat beside her, pulling her against his chest. "You're safe. We're safe." Sophie let herself sink into the relief, into the solid warmth of him. "What time is it?" 3 a.m. You should go to bed. Come with me." The words were out before she could second-guess them. "Not the guest room. Your room. I don't want to be alone tonight." Adrian was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." His bedroom was simpler than she'd expected. King bed, minimal furniture, books stacked on the nightstand. Sophie climbed under the covers, still wearing his clothes, and Adrian slid in beside her, pulling her close. "Just sleeping," he said, "until you're ready for more." "I know." Sophie pressed her face into his shoulder. "Thank you for everything, for saving me without making me feel weak, for teaching me to save myself, for being you. Thank you for seeing me, for not running when you learned what I was, for choosing this life even when it got dangerous." Adrian's arms tightened around her. "I love you, Sophie Carter," in case that wasn't obvious. The words should terrify her. They didn't. "I love you too, even though you're impossible and dangerous and have terrible business practices." Allegedly, terrible business practices. Nothing's ever been proven. Sophie laughed into his shoulder. They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Sophie's dreams were peaceful. The next 3 months passed in a blur of studying and training, lectures and evenings in Adrian's apartment that had become hers too. Sophie aced her pathology exam, then her clinical skills assessment, moving through second year with a focus she'd never managed before. The financial pressure was gone, replaced by space to actually learn instead of just survive. She still worked at the Mercury 1 shift a week, not because she needed the money, but because Diane would kill her if she quit entirely. Adrian thought it was dangerous. Sophie thought it kept her grounded. They compromised on Marcus sitting in a booth with bottomless coffee, reading the newspaper while she served tables. Maria finally got the full story over a marathon coffee session that lasted 4 hours. She'd been horrified, then fascinated, then weirdly proud. "So you're dating a crime boss," Maria summarized. "You used yourself as bait to catch a Russian mercenary, and you're still somehow managing to maintain a 3.8 GPA. When you put it like that, it sounds insane." "It is insane, but also kind of badass." Maria stirred her latte. "Are you happy?" Sophie considered it honestly. "Yeah, I am. Is that wrong? Being happy with someone who does illegal things?" "I don't know, but I do know you're the strongest person I've ever met, and if anyone can handle dating someone dangerous, it's you." Maria paused. "Just promise you'll be careful, and that I'm maid of honor if this somehow ends in a wedding." "It's been 3 months, and you're living with him, and he looks at you like you're the only person in the room, and you light up whenever your phone buzzes with his texts." Maria grinned. "I'm calling it now. Wedding within 2 years. Sophie threw a napkin at her, but didn't deny it. Things with Adrian shifted gradually from intense to sustainable. They developed routines: morning coffee together, evening training sessions, weekends exploring the city, or staying in and cooking elaborate meals. Adrian taught Sophie the legitimate side of his business, brought her to property inspections and construction meetings, valued her opinion in ways that made her feel like a partner instead of just a girlfriend. In return, Sophie dragged him to medical lectures, made him help her study by quizzing her on anatomy, showed him the world she was building outside his orbit. They existed in both spaces, learning to balance danger and normalcy, violence and healing. The nightmares about Daniel faded, replaced by dreams about the future. Sophie started researching residency programs, making plans for the clinic she'd open in an underserved neighborhood. Adrian offered to fund it. Sophie refused on principle. They compromised on him providing the building at cost. It wasn't perfect. They fought sometimes. About his overprotectiveness, about her stubbornness, about the fundamental incompatibility of their worlds. But they always came back to each other, to the understanding that they were better together than apart. 6 months after the night at the Mercury, Sophie walked into the apartment to find Adrian in the kitchen, cooking dinner and looking nervous. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately. "Nothing's wrong. Adrian turned off the stove, wiped his hands on a towel. "I want to show you something." He led her to his office, to the bookshelves where he kept his restoration projects. On the top shelf sat a new book, leather-bound, gold lettering, clearly expensive. Gray's Anatomy, Sophie read, first edition, 1858. It was damaged when I bought it, water-stained, spine cracked, half the pages loose. Adrian pulled it down carefully, showed her the perfect restoration. "I spent the last 4 months fixing it. For you." Sophie's throat tightened. "Adrian, because you're rebuilding yourself the same way I rebuild books, taking something broken and making it stronger, better, whole." He placed the book in her hands. "You're going to be an incredible doctor, Sophie, and I want you to have this. A reminder that broken doesn't mean unfixable." Sophie opened the book, saw the dedication he'd written inside. "To Sophie, who taught me that saving people starts with saving yourself. All my love, A." She kissed him then, book still clutched in one hand, the other tangled in his hair. "I love you," she said against his mouth. "So much it scares me sometimes." "Good. Being scared means it matters." Adrian pulled back, looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Move in with me, officially. Not just staying here because it's safer, but because this is home." "I thought I already lived here." "You know what I mean? Make it permanent. Bring your terrible furniture from your old apartment. Take over half the closet, complain about my book collection taking up too much space. Be my partner in everything, not just the dangerous parts." Sophie pretended to think about it. "What about when I start residency? 80-hour weeks, random schedules, me being impossible to live with? Then I'll learn to cook breakfast at midnight and massage your feet when you're too tired to stand." Adrian's smile was soft. "I'm not afraid of your schedule, Sophie. I'm afraid of losing you." You won't. I'm not going anywhere." "So that's a yes?" "That's an emphatic yes." Sophie set down the book, wrapped her arms around him. "But I'm keeping my guest room as a study, and I'm not changing my last name if we ever get married." "Who said anything about marriage?" "Maria. She's already called maid of honor." Adrian laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Of course she has. And for the record, I wouldn't want you to change your name. Dr. Sophie Carter has a nice ring to it." They had dinner, the elaborate meal Adrian had been cooking when she arrived. They talked about the future, about her residency applications, and his plans to expand into legitimate construction, about the clinic they'd build together someday, about traveling once she had time, about normal things that felt extraordinary because they were planning them together. Later in bed with Sophie curled against his chest, Adrian spoke into the darkness. "I was wrong, you know. That first night, when I said I wasn't a good man." "You are a good man, just a complicated one." "Maybe, but what I meant was, you make me want to be better, not perfect, not some sanitized version of myself, just better than I was before I met you." Sophie tilted her head to look at him. "You make me stronger, not because you protect me, but because you show me I'm capable of protecting myself. That's more valuable than anything else you could give me. Even the $100,000? Okay, the money's pretty valuable too." Sophie poked his ribs. "But the strength, the confidence, the feeling like I can handle whatever comes, that's priceless." They fell asleep tangled together, and Sophie dreamed about the future, about graduating medical school, about matching into a good residency, about the clinic with both their names on the dedication plaque, about Adrian beside her through all of it, dangerous and devoted in equal measure. The next 2 years passed faster than Sophie expected. Second year became third, clinical rotations replacing classroom lectures. She worked in hospitals, learning to diagnose and treat, to navigate the complicated politics of medicine. Adrian was there for every triumph and failure, celebrated when she successfully placed her first central line, held her when she lost her first patient, reminded her why she'd started this journey when she wanted to quit. She met more of his world, the people who worked for him, the businesses he ran, the delicate balance between legitimate and less so. Sophie didn't approve of everything, and she told him so, but she also understood why he did it, how poverty and survival created their own morality. They found their balance. Sophie kept Adrian honest, pushed him toward legitimate business, made him think about consequences. Adrian kept Sophie grounded, reminded her that saving the world started with saving herself, protected her when the medical system tried to grind her down. Fourth year brought residency applications and interviews, the stress of matching into a program. Sophie applied to New York hospitals exclusively. She'd found her home, wasn't interested in leaving. Adrian offered to make calls, pull strings, use his connections. Sophie refused until she didn't match her top choice, then reluctantly let him open one door. She matched into her second choice program, general surgery at a hospital in Queens, prestigious enough to build her career, close enough to the neighborhood she wanted to serve. Adrian threw her a party that was somehow both elegant and understated, attended by her classmates and his associates, two worlds colliding in the best way. Maria got drunk and gave a toast about how Sophie was the baddest woman she knew, which made everyone laugh and Adrian look proud. Victor, who'd become something like a friend, told embarrassing stories about Adrian's early days that made Sophie love him even more. Graduation came in May, Sophie walking across the stage to receive her MD, Adrian in the audience beside her mother's empty chair, holding flowers and looking like he might cry. After, they went to Daniel's grave, and Sophie told her brother she'd done it. She'd become a doctor. She was going to help people the way she couldn't help him. He'd be proud of you,
Adrian said quietly. I hope so. Sophie placed flowers on the headstone. I hope he'd understand why I made the choices I did. Dating you, accepting help, all of it. I think he'd just be glad you're happy. Sophie thought about the girl she'd been. Broke, exhausted, drowning in systems designed to keep her down. Then she thought about the woman she'd become. Strong, capable, loved, and loving, still fighting, but no longer alone. I am happy, she said, terrifyingly happy. They drove back to the apartment. Their apartment, full of Sophie's medical texts and Adrian's rare books. A blend of two lives that shouldn't work, but somehow did. That night, while Sophie tried on her white coat for the 100th time, Adrian watched from the bed. Question, he said, always with the questions. You remember the first night, at Mafia, when I asked what you wanted? Sophie turned from the mirror. You asked a lot of things that night. I asked what you wanted from life. You said to finish medical school, to help people, to stop drowning. Adrian stood, moved toward her. Did you get what you wanted? Sophie considered it honestly. She'd finished school, was starting residency at a hospital that would let her serve the communities she cared about. She'd stopped drowning years ago, learned to swim instead. And she'd found something she hadn't known to want. Partnership, love, someone who saw her completely and loved her anyway. I got more than I wanted, she said. I got you. Sophie? She kissed him before he could get sentimental. But yes, I got what I wanted, and I'm going to spend the next however many years helping people, building that clinic, proving that the system doesn't have to win. We're going to build that clinic, Adrian corrected. Together. Together, Sophie agreed. And that was the truth of it, the lesson she'd learned through all of this. Strength didn't mean going it alone, didn't mean refusing help out of pride. Strength was knowing when to accept a hand, when to fight your own battles, when to build something with someone instead of against the world by yourself. She'd started this journey drowning, and Adrian had pulled her up. But more than that, he'd taught her how to swim, how to navigate dangerous waters, how to save herself. That was the gift, not the money or protection, but the belief that she was capable of both surviving and thriving. Years later, when Dr. Sophie Carter opened the doors of the Carter-Russo Community Clinic, when she treated her first patient in the neighborhood where she'd grown up, when she looked at the dedication plaque bearing both their names, she would remember that first night at the Rothmore. The moment a dangerous man stepped between her and someone worse,
claiming her as his own before either of them understood what that would mean. She would remember all the moments after, learning to fight, falling in love, choosing danger because safety felt like a cage. She would remember that strength came in many forms, and sometimes the bravest thing you could do was accept help. And she would remember Adrian beside her through all of it, dangerous and devoted, her equal in every way that mattered. But that was years away. Tonight, Sophie Carter stood in their apartment wearing her white coat, about to start the next chapter of her life. And Adrian Russo watched her with love and pride, ready to walk beside her through whatever came next. Together, they'd mastered the chaos. Together, they'd built something worth keeping. And together, always together, they would keep building, keep fighting, keep choosing each other fully, with no turning back. Because some love stories didn't follow the rules. Some started in violence and threats, in desperation and dangerous bargains. Some were messy and complicated and probably doomed from the start. But the best ones? The ones worth telling? Those were the ones where two broken people found each other and decided that broken together was better than whole alone. This was theirs. Imperfect, dangerous, absolutely real. And Sophie wouldn't change a single thing.